Hey friends, how are you doing? It is time for our live. That's all the singing I have for you right now. So I had some pre-submitted questions that came in on Instagram, just sometimes from people who can't make it or are in a different time zone. So I'm happy to answer those if you guys can't make it. Just as a reminder, remember, nothing in this live is medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I'm a nutritionist. So I'm looking at everything through the lens of nutrition. Make sure you're understanding it's not for, diagnosing or prescribing or treating. And I hope you take this information and do your own research on it and kind of figure out what's best for your own body. But I hope that's kind of common sense here. I don't know your specific case. And so from the knowledge of the question that you're asking, I will give the best answer I possibly can, or maybe point you in the right direction. But you guys know your case better than I do. So first question that came in. Hello, I see you first. I always know that this account, I'm saying Vane, but it's like VANE. You tend to always be first, which is awesome. So one question came in, said, every time I take a warm shower or I go swimming in a pool or in the sea, or when I sweat intensely, I get red itchy patches all over my body with a white spot in the middle, mostly in my neck, upper arm, and on my back. They disappear again after 30 to 60 minutes, but it's very unpleasant and unaesthetic. I have no idea what it is, maybe some kind of histamine reaction. I've been having it for at least 8 to 10 years or so. Do you have any thoughts, and what could I do about it? I heard you say something about desiccated thymus for histamine. I think she's probably saying that was all the question. So first thing I would ask is, this is pretty common. It sounds kind of like tinea versicolor. I don't know if that's what you have. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. That's something to possibly look into. I've had quite a few clients that have had that, which kind of looks similar to what you're describing. But again, I'm not sure. So I just thought I would bring that up. I would also maybe explore histamine. But it is interesting that it has something to do with water. Does it have to do with temperature? Because you seem to say you sweat intensely, work out, sauna, but also when you swim. So it just, again, I would explore maybe temperatures. Is it sweat? I know a lot of people who have tinea versicolor or other rashes, they tend to get worse after a sweat, maybe, which tends to be fungal. So if you are sweating and then you're getting a rash from that sweat, what type of toxins is your body sweating out? That would be a question. Another thing is remember that a lot of heavy metals technically like to come through the skin. And so people who have a lot of heavy metal toxicity or are struggling detoxing, they tend to actually, kind of maybe get rashes, or their skin issues get a little worse when they start to move that stuff out, specifically if they're doing saunas or things like that. So that's another thing to consider. And then, it could be histamine as well. That's always, anytime we get rashes, hives, things like that, we always want to explore histamine as a possible causative factor as well. So that's what comes to mind. Another question. I have 3 small kids, so all day I live in chaos, and I'm also up frequently at night with them. Advice for helping my body through the constant stress. I think, first of all, understanding, maybe being a little bit more conscious of how you manage your stress, and could that possibly be managed for them as well? Could your habits, your better habits, stress-reducing habits, maybe snacking or de-stressing, possibly rub off on them and make their routine a little less chaotic? Just a question. Not saying it could be or could not be. Your situation better than I do. I see sometimes moms that are kind of stuck in this constant stressed out state, the kids kind of sense it, and so they tend to act out a little bit more. Whereas as mom starts to snack, they want to snack with mom, and as mom starts to relax a little more, they want to relax. And so you focusing on yourself and reducing stress oftentimes rubs off onto them, how we're communicating with our children, how we're kind of walking them through what's happening in life, all that kind of stuff. So that is kind of my 2 cents, is just do the best you can and take on small habits at a time, but don't overlook maybe implementing it with them and seeing if that's something that might benefit them as well. Does low temps and pulses mean I should skip weight training? If I personally do not weight train if I'm not eating enough. And I think I really practice that with my clients as well. Workouts are a privilege. They are not a necessity, meaning that if you're not fueling enough to just function throughout the day, you don't have any excess energy to expend on working out. And so it's just important to remember, like, we have to fuel our bodies to even benefit from our workout, or it's just going to suppress our metabolism more. Hi, Jess. I can't make the live, but I have a question for you. I fell pregnant via IVF back in March, but it unfortunately ended in a miscarriage. When I was pregnant, my first symptom was postnasal drip, and since then, it has not gone away. I have done another 2 cycles of IVF since the miscarriage. However, neither of them resulted in a pregnancy. Any thoughts on why my postnasal drip is still lingering and will not go away? My last IVF cycle was in October. Thank you. I am not, this is not my expertise. I know there are a lot of nutritionists that work with a lot of women who go through IVF. I've only had a handful of clients go through IVF while I've worked with them, so I don't have a lot of experience with IVF. What I would be considering is what types of hormones and medications needed to be taken. I believe there's estrogen involved, and I know Dr. Katharina Dalton, kind of the queen of progesterone, has talked about how the sinuses are greatly affected by low progesterone, and I'm wondering if the excess estrogen could be possibly a factor. Again, not an expert, so that's something I would maybe look into or research further, but I highly recommend reading the PMS Bible by Dr. Katharina Dalton, because she talks a lot about how the sinuses and sinus issues actually are usually tied to low progesterone. I get horrible cramps from my period. I'm so sorry, Maria. Do you have any tips for sinus congestion after reintroducing sugar? Yeah, start to work on bacterial balance. So a lot of people who starve their bodies of sugar, especially if they've struggled with yeast issues in the past or bacteria, which a lot of people have both. If we've ever taken antibiotics or things like that, oftentimes we have fungal overgrowth or bacterial overgrowth just where it doesn't belong. And sometimes just getting our metabolism up helps with that, but sometimes we actually have to do a little bit more. And the problem with starving the body of sugar, this is why I have a beef with Candida diets, the ones that say starve Candida of all sugar, is Candida and yeast in general gets pretty angry when you starve it, and it grows these long finger-like projections that can actually wrench the gut open and get into the bloodstream. And then that's when yeast actually can become systemic. So it can get into the sinuses, it can get into the vagina, the feet, there's people that have fungal foot issues. It can become systemic because it's looking for sugar, blood sugar. And the sinuses often are affected when people have gut issues, because that is a place, that's a mucosal place where certain bacteria can take up residence. And so really focusing on working on, metabolism as a whole, which tends to help with the immune system, but also maybe considering something like X-Clear or ion biome, some type of maybe holistic nasal sprays. Those can be helpful for some people. Some people choose to do a neti pot rinse that has grapefruit seed extract or xylitol in it to see if they can kind of clear their sinuses out of bacteria. But those are things that I personally would look into. And then if that's not working, then a lot of times I recommend that my clients actually start digging a little bit more into gut health and what's going on, what's the bacterial balance, usually a stool test, organic acid test. Those things can be pretty helpful. Hi, my temps and pulses have been up since taking your mini course. That's so awesome. I'm so glad to have you. Also, I see your name has ASMR. I love ASMR. It's people either love it or hate it. My waking up temp was 95 before. Now after about 3 months, it's 97.2. Is this still very low? That's an amazing increase. That's something to definitely celebrate. It shows that you've been working very hard. Our goal is to get a waking temperature of 97.8 and above. So if we optimally want to, we of course want to get to that point where we're 98.6, but sometimes it's a process. Been pro-metabolic for 3 cycles now, and I'm dealing with kidney and urinary infections and pain. I'm strict with all the foods you and Pete have focused on. I eat every 3 hours while awake. I can't do any dairy except hard cheese. Could it be phosphorus calcium balance? I can't figure it out. Seems my health is worse by the month on pro-metabolic. Do you have really bad gut issues? Some people who have really bad fungal issues or bacterial overgrowth issues. Remember that fungus can actually make oxalates, and oxalates can be very hard on the kidneys. So that's something to consider. Do you possibly need something that is maybe mildly antibacterial? Are you doing a raw carrot salad, mushrooms, bamboo shoots very religiously? And then how's your copper? Are you getting good copper intake? And I don't know, I personally, I know a lot of people who are on the Pete diet, sometimes are religiously following Pete to a T. That's not really my take. I actually think that people do need a little bit more variety. They don't need a lot of liquids. So I just think whole foods are more essential than focusing on like strictly PD foods. I do think that some people do better on starches and not as much sugar. So I think there is, as some people need a little bit higher fat, a little bit lower carb. Now, when I say lower carb, I'm not saying low carb. There's a difference. But some people just like implement carbohydrates way too fast, and then they expect their bodies to be able to handle it. Or if they have really bad bacterial overgrowth, they don't understand that if you quickly increase carbohydrates, you are going to, in fact, feed some of that bacterial overgrowth and fungal overgrowth, because oftentimes when we have slow metabolisms, we get fungus and bacteria where it doesn't belong. So sometimes like scaling back a little bit, on the carbs, making sure we're really focusing in on protein, and then doing very high quality fats like tallow, cocoa butter, coconut oil, ghee, grass-fed butter. Like that is where we kind of like need to figure out if we maybe did carbs a little bit too quickly. And then sometimes like some strategic antibacterials can come in handy. So those are some things that I would think about. If you were constipated for a day or two, what would be your routine to get things moving? I usually use like some really well-aged like Cascara Sagrada, or I will do, I really am a big fan of coffee enemas. I personally think that they were instrumental in my healing journey, because they have like a great affinity to pull iron and estrogen from the tissues. Now they're not for everybody, obviously, but I personally like them. So that's what I do. Like when I get constipated, I usually just like take Cascara, take magnesium bicarbonate, and use a coffee enema. Because sometimes like when you get constipated, remember that you're like absorbing all of those toxins, so you feel really bad. So I like to immediately relieve myself with a coffee enema, and then I also like to get things moving again. Because remember, it's not just about like what's moving through your colon, but usually transit time has slowed because of what's going on in the small intestine as well. So what Cascara does is it helps speed transit all the way through. Trufala works really well for some people. I use it as a tool in a lot of like gut restoring protocols, but for some people it actually can be constipating. So I think that's kind of like a 50-50 toss-up. But I like Trufala for other reasons. Hi Jess, I just stopped the pill last week and have been tracking my morning temps, but I am not sure what to look for to tell that I ovulated using my temps or otherwise. Thoughts? When we ovulate, we usually will see a spike of about 0.6 to a whole degree. And then a period starts 2-ish weeks later. So usually it's like 11 to 14 days after an ovulation. Sometimes people have shorter luteal phases. But I highly recommend, if you don't completely understand your cycle, my mini course, Mend Your Cycle, does go over all of that in detail. Or like maybe check out the book, Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Tony Weschler, like a resource like that, so you can better understand your cycle a little bit more. Because I know navigating the cycle after the pill can be a little bit confusing. How do you feel about taking T3 and T4 like the Ray Peat community? I'm looking for a thyroid boost after months on pro-metabolic. I think that a lot of people are just missing the fact that stress is involved. And when you implement thyroid hormone, sometimes what's happening is you're pushing the gas pedal, but fuel is still not getting into the tank well. So you're not fueling properly. And also, like, usually minerals are very low. So I think there's a lot of people, like, I've read a lot of the pro-metabolic forums and the Ray Peat community, and I feel like I wish I could like help all these people, because I see a lot of people struggling. They're taking like all the PD supplements, and they're just really missing like a big factor. Is just like happiness is important, like playing, getting out, and like getting into the sunshine. Laying down the foundations first is super important. A lot of people are not nailing the nutrition. They're just so obsessed with eating PD foods that they're just not eating enough. They're not eating well. They're not eating consistently for the sake of being perfect, and they're sacrificing their health in the meantime. So I personally believe that you should be able to get your temps and pulses up quite a bit using proper nutrition. And if you cannot, sometimes thyroid hormone comes in handy, but most of the time it's like a mineral issue, like potassium, magnesium, those types of things, which is why I focus on those things first in my course, Fully Nourished. I talk about minerals. I talk about those fat-soluble vitamins. I give you guys like a multi, I call it the herbal multi, or the DIY multivitamin, which is really just like nettle root, oat straw, and red raspberry leaf. So we're really hyper focused on minerals and getting enough calories and energy first, without obsessing about the perfectionism. Like, there's probably a lot of people that are PD that would say like, oh, all the stuff that I recommend is like not PD, but I don't really care, because I think it's more important to get enough calories and energy and protein, carbs, and fat than to obsess about like which foods are perfect and which foods are not. So I think that's a factor that a lot of people are missing. But if you're like very sure you're getting plenty of protein, plenty of carbs, plenty of fat from the right sources, you have kind of nailed, like if you do well on starch or sugar or a mixture of both, you're eating within 30 minutes of waking every day, you're eating a bedtime snack that works for you, you're not waking up throughout the night, like all those factors are starting to balance out, and your temps and pulses aren't going up, at that point, sometimes thyroid can be helpful. Hi, Jess. I know you apply progesterone topically, but do you also take it internally, such as Progesti? Yeah, I do. I'll do a few drops rubbed into my gums, but I also sometimes I'll get an orally compounded progesterone from my doctor. So I think that both work for me equally as well. I like both. So sometimes I'll rub like Progesti or Ona's progesterone oil into my gums for like an extra boost. But sometimes I'll actually take like the oral progesterone at night. So yeah, I do take it orally. Tips on avoiding adrenal crashes. Been working at this for months. Nothing seems to be helping. Could you also explain the connection between adrenal fatigue and shortness of breath? What are the best, safest foods to eat for GI flare-up of gastritis and GERD? So for tips on avoiding adrenal crashes, I think people oftentimes are really struggling for minerals. So they need to really, really focus hardcore on sodium and potassium. And I don't like to supplement minerals if you can get them from a whole food supplement. So for potassium, I really like coconut water powder and Goat's Mineral Whey. The brand is called Mount Capra. Both of those can provide about 1,000 milligrams of potassium per serving. And then in addition, getting plenty in your diet is of course good, because we need about 5,000 milligrams just a baseline every day. And then salt is so important, like salt. And then like adrenal crashes, I'm not really sure what you mean, but if you're feeling like exhausted, I would just reevaluate like my relationship with light. Am I getting sunlight in the morning? Am I blocking blue light at night? I would also be making sure I'm eating very specifically every 3 hours, and eating enough fat. Some people just really need plenty of fat to keep that blood sugar balance, because they're they're just struggling metabolically. Like, protein is very important for balancing blood sugar, don't get me wrong, but so is fat. And sometimes the slow absorption of carbohydrate that fat helps with can sometimes be helpful for people who are really adrenally just delicate, I guess we could call it. And yeah, shortness of breath is often caused by hyperventilation. So people are hyperventilating throughout the day. They're not really breathing deep belly breaths and relaxing their belly. They're constantly tight in their belly. Their constant posture is like this. So what's happening is their diaphragm is being suppressed, and they're taking these really shallow breaths. And then all of a sudden they have shortness of breath. And it's not because they're all of a sudden short of breath. It's because they haven't been breathing deeply all day long. So what I have my clients do is actually set their timer for every hour on the hour and tell them to take 10 or 15 deep belly breaths, which actually requires you to slow down for a second and focus on your breath. And a lot of times they're like, oh, I was hyperventilating all day. So that's just something to bring to your awareness. And a lot of people who are stressed out, their nervous system, is just in that constant fight or flight state. That's why they're hyperventilating. It's like they're running from an angry bear. Yeah, do that 5 times fast. What are the best, safest foods to eat for a GI flare-up of gastritis and GERD? Anytime like guts are sensitive, I think it's just important to like figure out what works best for you. I think that like stewed cooked fruits and gummies and bone broth and like really well cooked meats and root vegetables can be really good, like squashes and carrots and sweet potatoes and potatoes, really, really well cooked. Meat kind of like roasts and things. And then like broth, gelatin, and cooked fruit, like cooked apple or cooked berries. I personally would like stay away from like breads and things like that, and probably grains as well. They can tend to be a little bit more irritating. Is there another way to tell if you're on the right metabolic track? I find I stress about my numbers if I take pulses of temps, so I've stopped for a bit. Yeah, I think that's best. If you stress about numbers, then temps and pulses can actually be more stressful. I personally like, once you get to a certain point, it's just one of those things that you want to check in with from time to time, and you kind of already know how to predict it. Like I personally, on certain stressful days, I'm like, oh gosh, I know my temps are going to be low. And like, sure enough, they're pretty low. So, yeah, I think it's more just tracking like how you're feeling. Like, how are you reacting to stress? How are you feeling throughout your day? Are you feeling happy, warm, satisfied? How are you sleeping? Like, just overall how you're feeling is a great way to track how you're doing metabolically. Like, are you super reactive? And are you like, how are you conversing with other people? How are you maybe like use your relationship as a gauge, your moods? Like those are all signs of how we're doing metabolically. What's your favorite brand of oregano oil? I only use P73 by North American Herb and Spice Co. because I know it's wild oregano. I don't use a lot of oreganos because a lot of them are genetically modified, and that means that they have high levels of neurotoxins in them, which I just don't like. When you speak about using vitamin E for acne, hyperpigmentation, are you referring to oral or topical use? I think both can be applicable. I think it just depends on the person. For some people, like the thick, viscous vitamin E is too much for their skin, and so it makes them break out. But there's been a ton of people that have told me that they've gotten rid of their hyperpigmentation just by taking vitamin E internally. So I think it's just contextual based on the person, but I think that both can have an application. It just depends on like what you're going for. And sometimes it's just like, I know I say this all the time, which is probably irritating to you guys, but I don't, sometimes it just takes a little bit of experimentation. Knowledge is great. Like, I tell you like vitamin E helps with, iron and lipid peroxidation and all those things. But now we kind of know like, okay, what do I do with the vitamin E? Like, how's my body going to respond the best to it? And sometimes it's just like, you have to kind of figure it out for yourself. Let's see. I lost my place. You guys know it always happens at least once. Okay. What supplements are you currently taking, just out of curiosity? Yeah, so I talked about on my Instagram story like a week ago that I'm doing a Ovasitol experiment. So I'm taking Ovasitol religiously with breakfast and dinner, just for blood. Like I'm looking for a few benefits, like blood sugar control, mood, because inositol is shown in some studies to like boost dopamine. So I'm just looking for a few different things like bloating, gut, like how the gut reacts, all that kind of stuff. I'm also testing a few different like gut protocols. So I've been changing and shifting, but as of now, I'm focusing on like the mineral portion. So I'm taking vitamin E, vitamin K2, and oyster extract for zinc. And then I'm also taking thymus and kidney. And that's pretty much all I'm doing right now, in addition to just like food-based supplements. So like I do coconut water powder every day. I do goat's mineral whey every day. And then like nutrient dense foods overall. That's pretty much what I'm doing right now. And then from time to time, like I'll add in a detox lemonade. If it's like, say I'm in my luteal phase, I'll use the things I talk about in Fully Nourished strategically. Or sometimes if I'm feeling kind of like estrogen-y, I'll do like my liquid multi. So I use a lot of different things strategically, but if I was going to say like daily what I'm taking, that's what I'm taking. For the detox lemonade, is trophic chlorophyll concentrate okay? It's a popular one where I live and has chlorophyll and copper, sodium from mulberry leaves, glycerin, and sodium chloride. I'm not sure. I don't have any like experience with something like that. I know a lot of chlorophyll is just like chlorophyllin. So I think like it's different for everybody. I would try it, like if it's popular and it's all you can get access to. I would try it and just see where it takes you. Thoughts on wild oregano topically? I feel like it might be a little harsh, but I I don't see why, like, especially if someone had like some type of fungus issue or bacterial issue or something like that, like I could see that that could be possibly helpful. Is it true that if I have red urine after eating beets, you are low in iron or process iron poorly? I've never heard that before. I could have just never heard it before, but I've never heard that before. Beets are very, very pigmented, and so they do tend to affect like the stool or sometimes the urine as well. Have you incorporated pro powder into your diet? What changes have you noticed? Yeah, I like do here and there. I do a lot of like, I'll do it topically. Like sometimes I'll add it to my hair oil, like the oil I put at the ends of my hair to give me that kind of like shimmer. Sometimes I'll use it as like a mask. Like I'll mix it with honey and put it on my skin. Sometimes it's nice to just kind of give yourself like a little brush of it and like a sheen. And then, yeah, I just like put it in smoothies and stuff like that as like a calcium supplement. It has a lot of minerals in it. I haven't really, I guess, like noticed anything in particular. I think like a lot of times mineral protocols work together as a whole to benefit the person as a whole. But if I was going to say like, what specifically have I seen for pearl powder? I don't think I could pinpoint it overall. When you work to like restore depleted minerals, a lot of times the changes and the transitions can sometimes be very slow. It's sometimes like, oh, I'm just feeling a little bit better these days, or oh, I'm just sleeping a little bit better. I'm feeling a little bit more relaxed, or I'm, using my fuel a little bit better. Like I'm reacting to my meals a lot better. So I think sometimes like it's with some stuff, it's hard to pinpoint. With some stuff, like I see benefits right away. Like for example, Shilajit, that stuff like kicks my butt into gear really quickly. To be honest, like with pearl powder, I'm not like, there's not like one thing that I'm like, wow, like this is what I've noticed from its use. What is your experience with aspirin? Why is it popular amongst those on a pro-metabolic diet? Aspirin's popular because it is that kind of like acetyl salicylic acid, and salicylic acid has been shown to be just very like anti-inflammatory, to block prostaglandins, to possibly be maybe an aromatase inhibitor, to protect against like lipid peroxidation, and all the things that as you are depleting the body of PUFAs, you're trying to protect the membranes or the tissues as much as possible from the negative effects of having those PUFAs in your tissue, but now moving them and breaking them down. And so I think that's why it's so popular in the pro-metabolic community, is because it's one of the most effective supplements for when you are breaking these PUFAs down or getting rid of them from the body. Like that lipid peroxidation sometimes tends to be very damaging. Berkey water filters, what do you think of them? Do you have a water filter brand that you recommend? I think that they're like, I think everyone needs to kind of take where they are in life and let what they can afford and like have access to be good enough. Some people can afford a pristine hydro. That's awesome, amazing. It's a really great water filter, but I would never force myself to be in financial stress to be able to own one. I would save to work maybe towards it, put maybe like 20, 50 bucks away every month. And, in a year or two, finally own it. But I would never put myself in the financial stress of having it. So, a Berkey is probably the low, like it's a good filter to have when a disaster strikes or something like that. I wouldn't trust it for my everyday water filter. Just personally, but I think it is better than nothing. I think it's just really dependent on what you can afford. Like that's what I say it, and I think it is important to remember, because I think there's a lot of people that are like, oh my gosh, I can't afford that. And then they feel like their water filter is not good enough, which is not the case. I think Clearly Filtered has pretty good, like budget friendly options. I know like Amica Organics is a good one. But yeah, I would say if like you're picking the best water filter, Pristine Hydro would probably be the best. I personally don't have a Pristine Hydro yet, just because like I invested in a water filter a couple of years ago, and I don't feel like just like getting rid of it and getting a Pristine Hydro. So the one that I have, like the Aquasana, it's not my favorite. It's not one that I would recommend to other people, but it's good enough for me for now. And then, once that takes a kaput, I will get a Pristine Hydro. So that's kind of like my discussion on water filters. But I think like Berkey can be a great like rental option or baseline option. And then Clearly Filtered also has like some really good like fridge filters and things like that that are great for if you're like renting or stuff like that. After incorporating coffee, I lost my appetite and started having diarrhea. It's gone on for a week now. Any tips on getting my appetite back? I only crave a few things and can't stomach meat right now. I would really focus in on my gallbladder. A lot of people who like have nausea, lose their appetite, have diarrhea, it's the gallbladder all the way. And focusing in on it can be very helpful. Digestive bitters, beets, dandelion root tea, for people who are comfortable with them, coffee enemas can be very supportive for the gallbladder. So that's kind of oftentimes the case when people kind of lose their appetite or aren't digesting fat or protein well. They've got to really focus in on digestion. Trying to conceive and have PCOS or regular periods, but have been eating metabolically for 6 months now. Any other tips? What's some possible other stressors in I guess I'd say in the vicinity or in the life. So a lot of times food is good, especially and a lot of people say hey, I've been eating pro-metabolically. And I always want to make sure that they're not just eating pro-metabolically, the through the grapevine pro-metabolically. Make sure you're eating enough calories and enough protein, carb, and fat for your body, which can take some figuring out. Once that has happened, making sure you're doing the raw carrot salad every day, very effective. I also really think that vitamin E, the liquid multi and fully nourished, and magnesium are really areas to focus in on. Minerals in general, yes, but magnesium specifically, because if we're not getting a regular ovulation, there's something that we need to keep figuring out. We kind of have to keep ironing the wrinkles out until we can get that regular ovulation and start making that progesterone again. So those are kind of things that I would focus on, minerals, fat soluble vitamins, how's sleep, how's light exposure, how's stress, how's just stress in general in life. Are there areas of stress that need to be managed? And then is there over exercise a possibility? And then at that point, if all those questions are I'm doing great, I just can't figure it out, then, and I'm eating enough calories, I'm eating enough energy, at that point I would start to explore deeper issues. Are there gut issues involved? Are there mineral deficiencies, nutrient deficiencies, those types of things? Thanks always. How long after activated charcoal can you take other supplements, raw carrot? Usually it will say, I believe, don't quote me on this, I think it's an hour before, 2 hours after, or vice versa. It's 2 hours before, 1 hour after. Look on the package. Usually activated charcoal will say. But yeah, usually I practice 2 hours each way just to be careful. Thoughts on fermented sourdough for starting to incorporate gluten bread again? Is sprouted better? Yeah, I like fermented sourdough. Usually most sourdough is fermented. Just make sure it's truly fermented sourdough and not cheap sourdough where they put a sour in there, but there's also yeast and a bunch of other crappy additives. Truly properly fermented sourdough, people usually do pretty okay. Why do some people feel worse when going metabolic? Really struggling here. A lot of times people have gut issues, or a lot of people are running off of stress hormones, and they're so used to running off of stress that when they stop running on stress, they feel absolute you-know-what, because they're so used to it. They've been running on stress for 5, 10 years. They've been over-exercising and go, 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 go. And then, as their stress hormones are finally coming down, they no longer are getting those anti-inflammatory effects that come from those stressful steroids. And so now they're actually left with what's going on with their body, and it feels like crap. This happens a lot just because stress hormones can actually be a drug. Stress is a drug in the sense of it can feel really good while you're on it. It can feel like everything's better, everything's okay. And I don't know what kind of past you're coming from. This happens pretty commonly with people who are post low carb or post keto or post restrictive diets. They just feel absolutely trash. Because they are so used to that feeling of running off of stress. What makes carrot fiber or any other fiber a gentle fiber? So things that aren't going to super irritate the digestive tract. So for example, people would say well, nuts and seeds are insoluble fiber, like a carrot, but there are other factors in nuts and seeds that can be very irritating, right? Or we have for example, raw broccoli, we have, it's a mixture of soluble and insoluble fiber, but there are other factors in broccoli that could be irritating. So we're kind of looking at the food as a whole and how is how is it going to work for our gut? So in this way, like fiber is sometimes very like individual. Like some people are fine eating tons of beans. Some people are not. So it just kind of depends on you as a person. But carrot fiber does tend to be pretty gentle for most people. But some people say like it just feels like it destroys my gut. But I think it has like, you know, it tends to be very gentle for the payoff of having it bind to so much like estrogen and endotoxin. But yeah, like carrot's not the only gentle fiber. There are many other gentle fibers out there. But we're looking for a fiber that offers us the most benefit with the least amount of payout, with the least amount of irritation. Like I feel like, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, I just take psyllium husk for fiber, like no big deal. But I'm like, you know, a lot of times it's pretty irritating to the gut for some people. Thoughts on CBD and smoking weed while healing? Is it a suppressor? Well, a lot of times, I mean, CBD and I think like smoking weed, like THC should be looked at differently. I think there are a lot of factors. Just like with food, I think it's important to understand that, you know, with weed, it's first of all, like, is it a hybridized strain? A lot of these have a lot more THC than like older strains do. What about, are there a ton of pesticides? Remember, it's a pretty expensive crop. So a lot of people are protecting their crop. And so a lot of times weed is heavily sprayed in pesticides. Another thing to think about is just like the delivery. So a lot of people are using those like pens. I do not trust those. I think there's a lot of heavy metals. They're not regulated, like what has to be in those oils, those hash oils. So a lot of times there's junk that is not being disclosed. So I think like delivery method, type, strains, how it's grown, like everything matters. And then just remembering that it can induce a stress response. It's also like the research is pointing to it to be possibly pretty estrogenic and also increase the amount of estrogen receptors in the body. So it would make sense just because of like how people feel while smoking it. So it would make sense. As for CBD, like it does look like it's a PUFA, but I think that there could be other possible benefits. So I'm kind of neutral on it so far. I don't think it should be relied upon. So it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, if you need it to feel better, it's probably a Band-Aid. And then if you stop taking it, like immediately your symptoms come back. But if you feel like it's helping with like, you know, other factors and then like stopping it at some point, your symptoms don't come back. And at that point, maybe it's helping regulate something. That's really what I use to determine if something's like working or if it's just a Band-Aid. Is like, do my symptoms immediately come back right when I stop it? Maybe I need to focus on the root. Any ideas for what to do with raw milk that's about to expire? I would just make yogurt or something. I mean, like with raw milk, it doesn't technically go bad. It just turns sour, like sour cream or sour, like buttermilk. That's what buttermilk is, like sour milk. But yeah, you can like pour it into a crock pot and it will, and like put it on just like a warmer and it will turn into yogurt. Thoughts on lip plumping glosses that trigger like an inflammatory response? Do you think it has long-term effects? Yeah, I mean, usually those lip glosses have so much junk in them and you're like eating it all day long. Like it's just really weird. Like I personally am like not a big fan of the makeup industry. That crap, I should say, that crap is not, it's just not worth it for me, like the payoff. And just like notice how many beauty gurus just have like hormone problems, PCOS, endometriosis, infertility. Like there's a reason for that. It's not just like a random coincidence. I crave cheese and ice cream, but I haven't incorporated it yet. If I don't like milk, can't I slowly incorporate Parmesan cheese first? I think you can incorporate whatever you want to. There's no like right or wrong way to do it. I mean, I personally don't love milk either. I think a lot of people in Fully Nourished felt that way at first, but now they like crave it because of the nutrients in it. It is kind of like a perfect food. And then it can be used in like smoothies and things like that. Like it's not like you have to be like chugging straight up milk all day long. But yeah, I think like incorporate whatever you want at first. Fearing food is the worst thing. If you think you're going to have a reaction to something, you're going to have a reaction to it because the mind is way more powerful than the body. I remember reading that study where they took people that were like gluten sensitive and they told them they were taking like a gluten pill and they wanted to see their physiological reaction to it. And so these people were like bloated. They had like gas and diarrhea, and they were like constipated. And then at the end of the study, they were told that they were like given a sugar pill, and they literally had gluten sensitivity reactions to a sugar pill because their mind told their bodies to have those reactions. So I just think it's like a kind of a lesson to remember that the mind is more powerful. And if we tell ourselves we're going to react to something, we're going to react to it. If we tell ourselves we're not and it's not a problem, a lot of times we feel fine with it. Are there hormonal effects of uterine ablation, long-term effects? Honestly, I am not sure. I'm not that familiar with uterine ablation. I know there's a lot of people in my space that are more familiar with it, but I think like the thing about any type of interventions is like we have to weigh what our needs are, and everyone's different. Like no one can tell you what's right or wrong. Some people, like they're in a situation where they need it for well-being and actually for their body to kind of like get a leg up, whereas like some people are maybe doing things that have more cons. I think it's just I think with that it's more just doing your own research and then also just like your personal convictions. Also, just wanted to say how grateful I am for you. Even with gaining some safety weight already, I feel okay with it. Thank you for giving us women the empowerment and confidence we need to take back. Oh, you guys are awesome. And like, remember, I am a woman too. Like, I am not immune to these things. I think sometimes you guys think that I'm like beyond, beyond all of, I guess, like vanity and things like that. And that's not the case at all. But I think for me, knowledge is power, that my mind can overpower like those emotions. So yeah, there's some days where I'm like, man, I wish I like could fit into those old pants. But at the same time, I'm just like, I'm just in a season where my body just needs to be in this place. And so just remember, like, I'm right here with you. I'm sharing things with you guys because these are things that I learned that really set me free. And I'm right there, like experiencing all these emotions and hormonal changes with you as well. I started eating ice cream and collagen as my bedtime snack, and I never want to stop. Me neither. I mean, I eat ice cream with glycine every night, and it never gets old. Pumpkin seed oil is often recommended topically or internally for hair growth, but now that I know about PUFAs, I question that thought. I think the mindset behind it is maybe zinc, or maybe essential fatty acids, but like that's if you believe there are essential fatty acids. I personally like think that stuff like that. I've experimented with so many things over the years before I started eating pro-metabolically and looking at the body from a bioenergetic point of view. And I just like, there's so much crap. Like I tried the flaxseed oil, the pumpkin seed oil, like all just this like random stuff, like black cumin seed oil, just like all this weird crap, and nothing ever worked for me. Like if you guys could probably name almost every remedy in the book or every like popular PCOS or hormone thing, and I've tried it. Like I promise you, I've spent like literally like tens of thousands of dollars on just crap that I wish I could take back. But yeah, I wonder like what the mindset is behind the pumpkin seed oil thing. I don't see how that could be the case unless it blocks prostaglandins, which I could see that being like a short-term Band-Aid solution. Because remember, the hair follicles are really sensitive to prostaglandins. And so if you have a lot of inflammation or a lot of endotoxin coming from the gut, and that's causing high prostaglandins, that could possibly irritate the hair follicles. Like I won't deny that. Thoughts on tanning beds. A lot of people ask me this, and I think it's like a personal thing. Like I wouldn't just like fry in a tanning bed all like for long periods of time. But I think it's really contextual, because if you have a ton of PUFAs in your tissue, of course frying in UV is going to be a problem. That would be like frying a piece of bacon in canola oil. But if you are like, you're saturated with vitamin E and saturated fats, I mean, I wonder if the risk is the same. So it's kind of one of those things where I think it's really context. And I know a lot of people that use them to kind of combat the winter blues. So I think like it just depends on where you live and all that kind of stuff. But it also just depends on like your health, the state of your health, where you're at, all that kind of stuff. Recent. Wow, that was like the worst mumble so far, I think, today. Resources to read about the connection between the pelvic floor and tight jaw muscles. You've mentioned it before, and I'm super curious. trying to think about who talked about this originally. I don't know if it was Katie Bowman or, oh man, I'm trying to think. I wish I remember. If I do remember, I'll post it in my stories. But you know, I kind of made that connection when I can't remember. It was like I was learning about the development of the fetus, like how babies develop. And then somebody brought to my attention that like the same cells that make the jaw also like are making the pelvic floor, or, you know, all of the pelvic tissues. And so that was really interesting to me. And then like that started to help, like I would start to see connections between, like there were a lot of like pelvic floor therapists or like physical therapists that were talking about like pelvic health, and then also like tight jaw muscles and how they're connected. Then there are a lot of like more like sex therapists talking about how like, you know, your cervix and your jaw are connected. So I saw that like that was an interesting connection that they were making. So it's kind of like I've just started to see that pattern, but I can't think of the person that originally told that like shared that with me. But yeah, I have to look a little bit deeper. Hi, Jess. I stopped breastfeeding 1 year ago and my prolactin is in the 70s. How do I lower this naturally? My doctor had me DF the past 2 years. I am now back eating dairy thanks to you. Yeah, so I think it's just important to understand like prolactin can be a stress hormone, and usually is high if we're just under stress in general, or calcium deficient. So I don't know if you've already watched my IGTV on breastfeeding. If you haven't, I do recommend watching that. I kind of compiled the research and the science there. But I do know like estrogens can sometimes be involved, you know, just going into pregnancy estrogen dominant or being estrogen dominant, not being nourished enough in the sense of like, not that you're not doing enough. That is like not the way to look at it at all. I think a lot of people sometimes take when I say things very clinically, excuse me, to like mean it's their fault. It's never your fault ever, ever, ever. And I want none of you to ever feel that way. It's more like I'm just saying like, you know, XYZ is missing or nourishment is missing. And I just mean that in a way of like, those are things that we want to focus on trying to restore or replenish so that the imbalance is no longer occurring. And I think a lot of times, you know, unfortunately, like so many women who are breastfeeding are being told to go dairy free. And I'm just like, calcium is one of the most important things when you're breastfeeding. If you're not getting it, your body's going to have to make it. And so that's when prolactin can sometimes be very high and elevated. So a lot of times it's just a stress response, and it's more about focusing on the body as a whole. Like, how's my thyroid function? How's my stress function? And do I need to nourish a little bit more? And then sometimes it can be like looking at your history. So if you were breastfeeding and you're no longer breastfeeding, those imbalances can still be there from pregnancy or breastfeeding. If you feel like you've never recovered, you know, those are sometimes things we have to backtrack and smooth out so we can continue to move forward. So that's usually how like I approach some things as well. If we feel like there's a time where we can pinpoint where we stopped feeling good or we started experiencing our problems, what were we doing like the year or two before that kind of brought those on? And how do we like rewind that to get to where we want to be? That's kind of how I look at most cases. Thoughts on bacon and sausage? What brands are decent? That's more about, it's not really about brands, you guys. It's more about getting in the habit of looking at what the farmers are feeding these pigs, and also just their processes in general. So a lot of brands will be like vegetarian fed. That means absolute nothing. We want to be buying pork from people that we trust, because pork can just be a really bad food if we're not. So I think pigs should be like humanely raised and also like be fed a very high quality diet, which often means we have to purchase directly from farmers. The one brand in the store that I know of that's okay is Peterson's Farms, but that's available here in California. Like, I'm not really sure what's available, you know, anywhere else. And so that's where I just recommend you guys get familiar with looking at the ingredients in your food and caring about your food. And that doesn't mean you have to overhaul everything at once, but get into the habit of just like maybe one thing at a time. Thoughts on tiger nut flour for baking? You know, a lot of people have asked me about it, and I am like neutral on it. I'm not sure if it's a seed or a nut or a legume, or a root vegetable. I know like some people say it's like a starchy root. So I'm not like as familiar. I would just look at like caloric density and also like polyunsaturated fat content. But I personally like prefer just baking with like gluten-free flours, sweet white rice flour, cassava flour, even coconut flour in some cases can be okay for certain recipes. Sometimes like sprouted oats. The only time like grain-free, if you need to be grain-free, I could obviously see where like something like tiger nut could come into in handy. Entering fourth cycle since eating pro-metabolic, and the periods are even more catastrophic than before, twice as painful, twice as long, twice as much PMS. At what point do I know I'm doing something wrong? Have you taken Fully Nourished? So I don't know if you're like pro-metabolic or you're just kind of doing like piecing everything together on your own. But there's a reason why I have very specific things laid out in Fully Nourished, because I know when somebody starts eating pro-metabolic, the first things that's going to happen is their gut's going to be kind of disrupted. Their body's going to probably start purging like polyunsaturated fats, estrogen. And if they are not equipped to handle it, meaning they're not eating the right balance of nutrients, they're not eating enough energy, they're not getting enough protein specifically is important, but then they're not also eating enough fat and carbs in the right, like I guess in the right time frame or the right, oh my gosh, I'm looking for a word. I can't think of it. Pretty much in the right pattern, I guess we could say, then a lot of times the body's not equipped to handle the changes that come into place. This is why I also think that the raw carrot salad is very essential, if not 1-2 per day. And then why I highly encourage the detox lemonade and Fully Nourished as well, because the liver needs all the support it can get. But yeah, estrogen detox can be a you know what, but if it's not getting better and it's getting worse after the third cycle of doing the things that need to be done, then at that point, sometimes we need to cut carbs, not all the way, but really cut them down and eat a lot more fat and figure out our carb needs. Some people are just implementing carbs way too fast, way too quickly. I know I've said this before. I said this earlier in this live, but I want to emphasize it is if you have poor blood sugar control and then you just start pounding the carbs, your blood sugar is just going like this. And that's more stressful than less stressful. That's why it's very important if you're eating a very low carb diet. This is why I talk about this in Fully Nourished, how you implement this. You implement it very slowly so that your body doesn't freak out, because a freak out usually results in feeling worse, not better. Do you like or recommend Monat hair care or Monet? I never know how to say it. No, I mean, I personally don't. I don't like it. It made my hair fall out, and I'm very particular about how I take care of my hair for a lot of reasons, but mostly because it's just very sensitive. Also, like if you've ever struggled with PCOS hair loss, like you know that when you figure out what works, like you really don't want anyone touching your hair, and when they do and they make it worse, you just get really pissed off. So I don't, and I will never use their stuff. Plus, I just kind of look at the way that they formulate things, and I don't really like their skincare. There's lots of PUFAs. And then I guess now they're doing like nutrition, which weird, like just stuff like that just kind of bothers me. Weird question. I'm slowly replacing my beauty products while trying to save money and use what I have. If the body wash isn't as ideal, would it be better to use during luteal phase since estrogen is low? I just don't know why people use body wash ever. Like it's such a endocrine disruptor as it is, putting soap on our skin every day. Like I personally never use body wash. I only wash my pits and my bits, if you know what I mean. And I use like a prebiotic body rinse to do that. And because I only wash certain areas, it literally lasts me like 6 months. So, but I think that people can easily go without body wash. Like, I know you probably didn't want that answer, but body wash is, in fact, like anytime you wash your microbiome, because your skin has its own specific delicate bacterial balance, anytime you wash your body off of bacteria, you're disrupting that microbiome, and it can take days for that to restore itself. Should talc be avoided in beauty products? I personally would be avoiding it. I mean, man, the stuff that's coming out about that stuff is scary. Should we be worried about toxins in oysters? I personally don't worry about them. I'm not like consuming a ton of them. Remember guys that none of our food is perfect anymore. all of our food in some way, shape, or form is really messed up. And so if we obsess about every little thing that's wrong with our food, we're not going to be able to benefit from all the things that are right about certain foods. And if our body gets nutrients and our body gets energy, remember, it knows what to do with toxins. It just can't do it if it doesn't have enough nutrients or energy. So that's kind of the take I take. I focus on whole foods. I don't stress about individual details. I do the best I can, get the best quality I can afford without stressing, and I forget about the rest because who cares? At the end of the day, we all are going to die. I know that's like a very morbid way to look at things, but at the same time, it's kind of freeing because I don't know what people are trying to do like with all this perfectionism. It's just really like, it's very overwhelming. Hi, Jessica. What B vitamins do you recommend? I personally like getting B vitamins from food, like beef liver, bee pollen, but some people can't do bee products. So sometimes like a great like methylated bee or like a good like B vitamin blend. Like I really like Health Natura's B vitamin blend can be good. Could you remind me, number one, why magnesium bicarb is good, and two, how to take? Where do you get yours? Thanks for patiently answering every week. Yeah, so magnesium bicarbonate is probably the most bioavailable form of magnesium because it's in its bicarbonate form. We used to get exposed to a lot of bicarbonate when we drank spring water that kind of ran over rocks and crystals and things like that, but we no longer are getting exposed to this kind of water, and so we're really hurting for bicarbonate. And the pancreas in general is like it's an organ that has a high need for bicarbonate, but our whole digestive tract does. And so I like magnesium bicarbonate. Does that mean it's the only good form of magnesium? No, I think that magnesium chloride has benefits. I think that magnesium glycinate, malate, they all have applications that can be very helpful. So, but that's why bicarbonate is good. It's really helping you, or it's helping provide something that you're really not getting exposed to pretty often, which is bicarbonate. And then how to take. I usually take it, like I'll just put like 2 to 4 ounces-ish, like just some splashes in like orange juice or my adrenal cocktail or something like that. But I tend to take it away from food because it can reduce stomach acid. So I take it in between meals. And I get mine, well, I have been getting mine from Mitigate Stress, their master mineral drink, which I probably will when I'm feeling kind of lazy. But on Black Friday, I bought a Soda Stream because it was on sale, and with the intention of making my own bicarbonate. And you can make your own bicarbonate using like carbonated water that you force CO2 into, like with a Soda Stream, and then magnesium hydroxide powder, which you can buy in bulk for very cheap. And you can just YouTube it. Like if you're interested, just type in like how to make magnesium bicarbonate with magnesium hydroxide powder, and Mitigate Stress's video on how to do that will come up. Is popcorn healthy? I've heard it is full of mold. Gosh, I wouldn't stress about popcorn being full of mold. I would be asking myself, like, how do I react to it? How do I feel after I eat it? Like, how are my hormones doing? Like, those are questions I would be asking myself. I just don't understand this mindset, you guys, of letting other people scare you about your food. Stop letting others tell you what to eat or fearmonger you about food. Just tune into your own body. Use your common sense. Look at those ingredient labels. Are you filling your body with you know what that you don't know what it is? Look at those ingredients. It should be popcorn, coconut oil, salt. If it's not, second guess what you're putting in your body. And then second of all, how are you reacting to that food? Are you feeling good after you eat it? Are you feeling warm, energized? How's your digestion? How's your sleep? How's your mood? Those are things we should be asking ourselves regarding food. Also, I haven't heard you talk much about eating avocado and olives. Thoughts on those? I don't avoid them, but I'm not like, oh my God, they're the healthiest thing ever. Some people just don't do well with avocados, and I think that they're kind of like an unsustainable food right now. They're destroying all of Mexico. It's just really unfortunate. So that's why I'm not a big fan of avocados. I think they're kind of unsustainable in that way. They're also being picked very unripe. And so a lot of us are getting these unripe fruits buying them and then letting them ripen, which always comes with a downside. So I think it just depends on where they're grown as well. Like more tropical avocados are obviously going to be a lot healthier. But again, like I love a good avocado once in a while. I live in California, for Pete's sake. And then olives are also, I think that they're great. Like I think that they can be a good snack if you enjoy them. Amazing. Lots of times they're really salty. It's not like you're going to like get enough fat from olives to really matter. And, you know, obviously olive oil, like true olive oil can be very protective. So I think olives are a great snack, like amazing. But also just remember, like we need carbs, we need protein. Like those can be amazing snacks, amazing additions to the diet, but they're more like complements, I guess. Is it common possible for KP on the inner thigh, keratosis pilaris is what she's referring to start once eating pro-metabolic? If so, why would this happen? So everyone is different. Like sometimes people say that inflammation brings their keratosis pilaris on. Sometimes people will say that it's like a vitamin A deficiency, which oftentimes can happen because our needs for vitamin A go up when we're eating pro-metabolic. You know, as our metabolism speeds up, so does our need for a lot of nutrients. This is why you'll find a lot of people in the pro-metabolic space, including myself, are focused on specific nutrient-dense foods, because I know that as you speed up your metabolism, your old trash metabolism didn't have a high need for some nutrients that your new metabolism now does. And sometimes people forget this. They like are not being as careful about meeting their nutrient needs and they're struggling because of it. So some people say like their KP starts up because of vitamin A deficiency. So I think it's just kind of exploring, but if like skin issues or gut issues pop up, a lot of times it's because there's bacterial overgrowth that needs to be dealt with. Or if you know, like for a fact you have gut issues, then that's usually why. Do you ever eat chicken liver if beef liver isn't available, or is it too much PUFA? Yeah, I eat chicken liver. It's very mild. It's nice to make like a pate out of it because I don't like beef liver pate. So chicken liver pate is so much more doable. Thoughts on lavender oil and lotions? Is it estrogenic? Well, is it true lavender oil? A lot of these brands, like these skincare brands, are using like not true lavender oil. And then of course, like it's still a toss up if lavender oil is truly estrogenic. There's some studies that pointing to the fact that they are, but, or that lavender is, but again, like studies are usually poorly controlled, especially the ones done on lavender. So I think it's still kind of a toss up. I just personally am careful with body products and I don't like to put a lot of essential oils on my skin, mostly because if they could possibly be estrogenic, then I'm not down for that. Does an outside source like hot tub, sauna, which acts as raising temps, also help speed up your metabolism? Sometimes yes, like warming your body up. I do find like a heat lamp that I use or like a bath can sometimes speed it up. But if you don't eat enough sugar beforehand or you are not like hydrated properly with minerals, sometimes it can actually induce a stress response. Like a really hot bath can induce a stress response for some people, or like a sauna can induce a stress response for people. Because remember, you're like sweating out, your core temperature is really heating up. And so a lot of people aren't fueled enough to be able to handle what speeding up or heating yourself up does to the body. How much potassium should we aim for? I think like the general recommendations like 4,700 milligrams per day. So like aiming for that is always a good idea. And then like if you have adrenal issues, usually getting more than that is a good idea. Did you mention not loving pineapple for some reason? Again, like you guys know, I don't like to stress about foods, but sometimes I just know too much, which is kind of annoying. But pineapple can be high in L-tryptophan and increase serotonin quite a bit. Does this mean I don't eat pineapple? No, I love pineapple. It's so good. But I'm not going to be like chugging pineapple juice all day either. Are handmade local soy candles okay to burn, or at least better than traditional ones? I don't know. Like, what are they using to make the candles? It's not just about like the soy, but like the fragrances. But yeah, I mean, generally, like someone that puts a lot of love and care into the product is usually better than someone that doesn't, or a big company. Are there certain potatoes that are easier to digest than others? If so, which are best? I find this is my personal, and again, it's just like experiment to figure it out. You never want to eat potato skins if you're struggling with gut issues, and you always want to make sure they're really, really well cooked. So don't eat undercooked starch. It's like the worst thing ever. But I like Yukon Gold. I find that they're the easiest to digest after russet potatoes. So russet potatoes and then Yukon Gold. I think that cooking them differently usually results in different types of digestion. So like baking a potato to me is the easiest digested. A lot of people tell me mashed potatoes are easy to digest, but like for me, they're probably the least well digested. I feel really good when I do like a baked potato with like butter and sour cream and a ton of salt. Like, ooh, so good. Also like shredding it and then like, patting it with a paper towel and then cooking it into a hash brown tends to be very well digested for me. It makes me nice and warm and happy and satisfied. So, cooking potatoes differently can sometimes result in different digestion. What prevents kidney stones? I think it's more about like what causes kidney stones. And a lot of times it's like high oxalates. And a lot of people will blame like oxalate containing foods, which can be like a factor. But remember that like yeast can also, and mold, or funguses, I should say, can make oxalates as well. So people that struggle with kidney stones a lot of times have like yeast overgrowths and gut issues that need to be dealt with. But sometimes it's like calcium overcalcification as well. What systemic enzymes do you take, Jessica? When I use them, I have experimented with Doctor's Best. Vitalzymes is one that I've experimented with. Matt's MitoLife systemic enzymes I've experimented with. I don't have like a particular favorite. Matt's do work well, but they're also very expensive. So I think that Doctor's Best can be okay, an okay option. Sometimes it just takes a little bit more. Is a cranberry cocktail okay for a detox lemonade? It's just water, cranberry juice, and sugar. So not entirely sure if that even qualifies as a cocktail. Haha. It's just not as concentrated, but I would just use that as the base instead of water. So since it's kind of watered down, I would just like use that, but it probably doesn't have as much cranberry in it as like cranberry concentrate. That's why cranberry concentrate tends to be so expensive. It's like truly concentrated cranberry, but there's nothing wrong with using like cranberry juice. Ever since I can remember, I've always had excessive sweaty hands and armpits. Do you think this could be genetic or something people are just born with, or more hormone issues, cortisol issues? I think it's just kind of like working, if you know like you're someone that's driven by stress, I think it's like process of elimination. Like if I knew that I was someone that has had hormonal imbalances for a really long time, lots of stress, like, I'm probably running on stress hormones, then I would say like probably a lot of things that I thought were normal are maybe not normal, but I wouldn't assume that until they go away. You know what I mean? So I can't say like yes or no, but I know a lot of people get like really sweaty hands or really sweaty armpits when they have like thyroid issues or adrenal issues, or they can't sweat. So it's just like sweat imbalances. I'm struggling with portions and how much to eat, like how much protein, carbs, and fat should be in each meal. It just really depends on your calorie needs overall. This is why I teach in Fully Nourished, like determining what are your calorie needs. You can use like TDEE calculator or xrx.net. I really like that one. So just trying to figure out like what are my overall calorie needs? Where am I at? Where do I maybe want to be? And then you break it down per meal. So to give yourself a ballpark. So for example, if you say like, I need 2,200 calories a day. Let me just grab my phone so I can calculate this for you guys. So, let's say 2,200 calories, calculator, 2,200 calories a day, and you're trying to do 25% of your calories from protein. So you're going to times that by 25%, and that's going to equal 550 calories. Well, I know that there are 4 calories in a gram of protein, so I'm going to divide that by 4. And look, I got 137.5 grams of protein. So then, if I'm eating 3 meals and 3 snacks, well, I'm probably going to try to I like to aim for like 20 or 30 grams of protein at meals. And so if I'm going to say like, okay, I'm going to have 30 grams of protein at meals, which is pretty doable, then that means that's 90 grams of protein is going to be used for my meals. And then I'm going to have 3 snacks. So the leftover, about 50 grams of protein, is going to be split between my snacks. So you divide 50 by 3, and there you go. You have about 15 grams of protein per snack. So there you go. You do 30 grams of protein on a meal, 16 grams of protein on a snack. If you're like, I don't want to eat 30 grams of protein on a meal, I want to eat 25, then you would do the calculation like that. But that's how I calculate. And again, it doesn't really matter. Like, I don't obsess about numbers, but it can give you a great ballpark if you have just absolutely no clue how much to eat at each meal. What are your thoughts on microgreens? I think if you like them and you enjoy them, they can be pretty nutrient dense, especially if you're growing them yourself and you know what soil they come from. I wonder if you're asking me that because you saw like Rose Uncharted stories today talking about microgreens. Um, I think like it just kind of depends on your digestion and how you digest them. They tend to be pretty easy to digest. Vegetables tend to be like used really well as a complement or like a condiment to meals and not as like the main. But yeah, I would say microgreens or baby greens in general tend to be pretty easy to digest. What do you think about Bragg's nutritional yeast? Bragg's is fortified. So I like unfortified nutritional or brewer's yeast because fortified for fortification with synthetic B vitamins often leads to like irritation in the gut. Does that mean like it's horrible? No, it just means it might irritate you. Jess, I started drinking sips of cow colostrum from my local farm and I love it. Do you have any experience with drinking it? I've never drank like fresh colostrum, which is like, that's amazing that you have access to that. I have used the powdered stuff, but I'm sure it's very different. But yeah, I use colostrum in gut protocols all the time. It's very helpful because it's rich in immunoglobulins. So I really like colostrum for kind of helping with gut health. It's crazy how many YouTubers I've seen with incredibly traumatic birth stories, wondering if this is a trend due to misguided nutrition, hormone, and exercise advice. That's a good point. I also think it's just like a general misunderstanding of the female body. Like people are really afraid of birth. They also just like are not, I think women are being done a disservice right now because they're focused so much on like a baby being like an accessory in the sense of like, I'm like an insta pregnant mom, that they're forgetting to like nourish themselves properly, prepare their pelvic floor. Like if every mom did that where they were like nourishing their baby and protecting their pelvic floor and like preparing their birth plan, they would probably be so much better off than like focusing so much on like the baby's clothes and their clothes and the stroller and all that stuff. Like, the health is the most important aspect. Is there any easy way to tell if histamines are an issue? I tend to think like the best way is just going by symptoms. So hives, rashes, like itchiness, what else? Vomiting, nausea, especially like around the period. If you haven't watched my IGTV episode on histamine, I highly recommend it because I talk about that kind of in depth. With histamine, it's usually a symptom of a problem and not the problem. Most people with histamine issues are severely estrogen dominant and also very copper deficient. So those are usually like the two problems with histamine. So yeah, histamine can definitely cause symptoms, but it's a symptom of a larger problem. And usually there's inflammation involved and just like general gut irritation. But I think that like sometimes the best way to look for it is to go by symptoms. Obviously, also if you're reacting to histamine foods, that can be a big red flag as well. And then, I think doctors can run like a blood histamine level. I do believe they can. I know like in the functional space, a lot of times people will use like organic acid testing and test for oxalates, which can be a sign of funguses. And oftentimes if you have like fungus issues, then usually histamine is involved as well. So it's more of like conclusions, but I do think some doctors can run like a histamine test. Will they? Not always, but they can. Isn't meat, broth, dairy, potatoes a lot of phosphorus if you can't digest dairy? Yeah, it definitely can be. But again, like I don't really stress about phosphorus as long as you're getting enough calcium from other things. That's why like if you can't do dairy, I always say it's very important to do eggshell calcium or pearl powder, or even like greens broths to get the calcium, as long as you can handle the oxalates. Loved your podcast episode with Matt Blackburn. Always learned so much from you. I'm so glad. That was kind of like a random episode. We just talked about so much random stuff. But yeah, a lot of you guys gave good feedback. You recommend taking like a charcoal supplement before some people. Is that almost like a detox? Not entirely sure what kind of issues that may help. So would you be able to clarify? So yeah, activated charcoal absorbs everything. So if you're in fully nourished, we talk about in the digestion a lesson that endotoxin can sometimes be a problem for most or for people, but oftentimes it's a problem for a lot of people. If you ever have had like antibiotics or gut issues or anything like that, or have ever eaten like a standard American diet or junk, then you probably have bacteria or funguses in a place where they don't belong. And that can result in excess endotoxin. And then when we eat foods that feed that bacteria, they produce endotoxin. And if you have a leaky gut or intestinal permeability, that endotoxin gets to a place where it doesn't belong, and therefore it's causing inflammation in the body. And so some people have a very clear endotoxin reaction, meaning that their like symptoms are really bad. Maybe they're having histamine symptoms. Maybe they're feeling moody, like irritated after eating something. Maybe something just didn't sit well with them. Maybe the raw carrot salad is not doing it for their detox. And so they'll take activated charcoal because it absorbs everything in the gut. Now, it can be kind of constipating because it is drying, and it's an adsorber, so it absorbs a lot of things, but that's kind of the point of taking it. So it's just important to drink a lot of water when you take it. But yeah, it just can be a very effective binding tool if you have a lot of toxins coming out of the liver or the gallbladder, or just in general, your gut's kind of messed up. Charcoal can be helpful at absorbing whatever is bothering you. How come I could digest dairy so well before I went pro-metabolic? Now I have a violent reaction from a tablespoon of milk, whereas before I was drinking plenty. It sounds like gut issues. Like, I don't know what was the biggest change before you went pro-metabolic. Like, I need context, I guess. Like, I always say, like, okay, what changes did you make? Like, what were the biggest changes that you made that you feel you're not reacting well to? Reverse those changes. Don't do those things, and then figure out what is working and what's not working. I think like that's really important, because if you were eating dairy before you went pro-metabolic, what in your mind identifies pro-metabolic eating? Was it adding a ton of sugar? Was it doing a bunch of weird supplements? Like, I don't know what to you meant switching to pro-metabolic. In my mind, when somebody switches to pro-metabolic eating, they're eating more whole foods, more root vegetables. They're maybe being much more aware of like how they cook their vegetables. They're not doing as many vegetables as maybe they were before if they were like really heavy on the cruciferous veg. They're balancing their meals a little bit more, and they're eating every couple of hours. That's really like, in my mind, what I think of when I think of pro-metabolic. I don't think it's very like extreme from other diets. I think it's just more being aware of nutrients and balancing your blood sugar. But some people have really bad gut issues. And a lot of people who go pro-metabolic are going pro-metabolic for a reason. I don't know why people would go pro-metabolic if they're already feeling good. So many people will say like, oh, I feel horrible now, but I felt so amazing then. And I'm like, but then why did you switch your diet? So a lot of people, sometimes I say, like, I've talked about this a lot in lives before, is don't let yourself have short-term memory loss when it comes to your health. Is keep track of your symptoms as well, because sometimes we like forget things. And then also, if you know you have gut issues going into a pro-metabolic diet, know that it's going to be rough, and you're probably going to have to take lengths to deal with those gut issues, more than just like pro-metabolic eating. Should we be cautious of buying deli meat, like pre-cut ham, for example, even if it's organic? I remember hearing something about deli meat being full of not so good things. I mean, as long as it's just pure meat, I don't know why people would stress about it. Like, I just get like True Story organic ham or True Story like organic turkey, and it tends to be fine. What if milk gives me no digestive issues but makes me feel a bit off? Do I still have an intolerance? I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but everyone's a little different in how they react to foods. And if you feel off when you drink it and you feel great when you don't, then sometimes it just takes, sometimes that's just like an easy decision. Any suggestions for eliminating histamines efficiently? It's not really about eliminating histamines efficiently. Histamines are a part of our immune system. They're a very important part of our immune system. They're also a very important part of digestion. It's really not about eliminating them. It's about breaking them down well. And a lot of times this has to do with hormonal balance. So many people who are estrogen dominant have histamine issues. The estrogen dominance needs to be dealt with. Many people who are progesterone deficient have histamine issues, and so obviously getting progesterone up can help. A lot of people who have very elevated cortisol have really bad histamine issues. And then endotoxins. So the gut health portion of it can be very large as well. So do you have bacterial imbalances going on? Or do you possibly just have a lot of endotoxins? So I talk about this in my IGTV episode on histamine, but it's really about figuring out why histamines are maybe you have high histamine or why you're not breaking it down efficiently. And that's usually like maybe kidney, liver issue, which can be iron. So there's a lot of different factors involved, but a lot of times it tends to boil down to gut health, estrogen dominance, and iron overload. Do any of our FN students who are trying to conceive take a prenatal? If so, any recommendations? I know you don't like them, but feeling pressure to include one just in case. Yeah, I totally understand that. I think like looking for one, I personally would, if I like wanted to take one just in case, I would just look for one without iron. Like the Seeking Health one tends to be a pretty popular recommendation. I am not very familiar with it, but I know that it tends to be like a lot of people have told me it's a pretty good formula. But if you're feeling like really pressured, I highly recommend watching Innate Functional Nutrition. She did hop on her stories one day and like break down popular prenatals, and it was like so informative. I hope she saved it to her stories. If not, send her a DM and say like, hey, Jess was asking if you could save your prenatal review to stories, and I think you guys would really enjoy it. Hi, Jess. I have candida overgrowth, H. pylori, and I'm wondering what my suggestions you have for healing. My naturopath recommended Matula tea, but it is very expensive, and I don't know of anyone using it. Yeah, Matula tea is pretty popular. I think it can work well in conjunction with like mastic gum or mastic like straight from Greece, excuse me. And then Manuka honey is also pretty effective. I like to get the Manuka honey like little ginger, what are they called? Like lozenges, or like, you know, the ones that you suck on. They're like hard pieces of honey that have ginger in them. That works so well. It's just like the Manuka brand, like the Manuka honey brand. I can't remember. Let me look. And that's kind of like my favorite for H. pylori, in addition to like just regular herbals like FC-Cytal and Dysbiocide, or like Candibactin, AR. So I like Biotics Research blends, and I also like Metagenics blends of herbs. And those tend to like take care of like most funguses and bacteria and H. pylori, or at least help you get a handle on them. So that's kind of like that's my first line of defense, as well as oregano, and then all the soothers. So a lot of times like our stomach acid is low, which is why we have H. pylori, and our stomach acid is low because we have like zinc deficiency, sodium issues, potassium deficiency is huge. What else? Vitamin B1, huge. And then like glycine, huge. So those are all important. Oh yeah, so the Manuka honey lozenges are by a brand called Wetter Spoon. That's what they look like. I really like them. So that is my favorite kind of like H. pylori, keep it under control. Temps and pulses are good. Barely any PMS symptoms. Don't have low progesterone according to Dutch tests, and neither do I have low estrogen. So why might my periods only be 2 to 3 days and pretty light? Maybe blood flow. How's your pelvic floor? Do you do like a lot of squats? Do you have like a hip tilt maybe? Sometimes we just have 2 to 3 day periods that are kind of light, but sometimes like blood flow can be restricted from getting to the uterus. So that's something, but I mean, if no one's telling you it's an issue, maybe it's not an issue unless you feel that it's an issue. What if your temps and pulses are ideal, but you still feel lousy? Then temps and pulses don't matter, because temps and pulses can lie for some people. They can be driven by stress. And so a lot of times people start eating like pro-metabolic and really like getting a handle on their symptoms, and their temps and pulses immediately drop because now they're no longer running on stress hormones, and they're seeing a clearer picture. So temps and pulses are not the only marker of health. Feeling good is a marker of health. Eating according to FN principles. Oh, yeah, I think it's just kind of important to figure out, like, if your Dutch test is saying everything's good, how is your cortisol levels? Like, is your stress hormones good as well, or are your stress hormones good as well? I think that's important. How's testosterone? Like, are all hormones in context balanced? If that's a yes and you're feeling really good, I wouldn't stress about it. Sometimes like periods do get a little bit weird. As long as they go back to normal, or you kind of find where your like happy medium is, that's the thing that's important. There's a lot of talk in the autism world regarding copper toxicity. Wonder if you have any thoughts on this. I think that there's a lot of factors in autism from my research. I don't, obviously, like, there's still a lot more research to be done, but I think like a lot of people love to blame one thing. And I think that there's like a lot of things, because I've also heard of a lot of people helping their children with different approaches. So that usually means that there's different factors involved. Some people say like copper toxicity. Some people will say like heavy metals. Some people will say serotonin. I do know that there's a lot of evidence showing serotonin and estrogen being a factor, just because I'm very familiar with Dr. Pete's work. And so he talks about that a lot. But I do think, like, obviously remember that copper and estrogen love to hang out together. So does iron. So those are some things to think about. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. I think there's a lot of research still to be done. Should we be consuming pearl powder if we can't tolerate dairy yet? I think that's just up to you. I think like eggshells, calcium, pearl powder are great sources of non-dairy calcium, but I think it's just up to people in general. Copper toxicity just means you don't have enough retinol, vitamin A, to load it into ceruloplasmin. So you've actually deficient in bioavailable copper and copper toxic at the same time. Yes, exactly. Copper toxicity. And there's also like a lot of different forms of copper. So there are some more toxic forms of copper in our environment. And yes, we need the nutrients to use that copper. But on the flip side, there's also some weird forms of copper that are not like full true copper as well. Can you go over the significance of the chlorophyll in the detox lemonade? Is it just because it's rich in copper and magnesium? Yes, and it's also rich in enzymes. And remember, the liver functions off of enzymes, and part of detoxification requires enzymes. Just wanted to say that I started following you to regulate my period, still working on it, but my IBS I've had for 5 years has almost completely disappeared. Was not expecting that to happen. That's awesome. Sometimes it's really interesting because we sometimes don't connect certain factors together, but sometimes they're all connected. And so sometimes we start we're trying to work on the root cause of one thing, and we end up balancing something else. And then eventually we end up balancing the thing that we set out to balance. It's a really interesting course of events. Dutch test shows very low free cortisol, basically a flat red line, and moderate level cortisol clearance. What's this about? I definitely feel like I could use more cortisol in my life. Yeah, so that's usually a sign that we're in a very depleted state, because I always talk about when I do stress education that what goes up must come down. So it's really interesting. There's the 3 phases of stress. So that first like alarm phase, where our stress hormones tend to be very, very high. Our body can only sustain this alarm phase for so long, right? Sometimes this is 5 or 10 years. We feel amazing, like we're super busy, go, 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 go. We're just like, awesome. Like I'm getting everything done. I'm so obsessed with doing things. Like I just love doing things, And then it's like those people that can never say no. They're always doing everything. They feel great doing it. And like, it's exhausting to just look at them. And then eventually the body can't sustain that anymore. And what goes up must come down. Now, some people are starting to feel like trash right here. But if they test their levels, they're going to look normal because they're back into that normal range. But they're on their way down. So then they get tested like a year later, and they're in the trash can, which is what, like a great example is kind of like what's going on, like very low free cortisol clearance is kind of low. And it's because what came up must come down. And so some people, that course of stress takes years. Like some people are stuck in that high stress alarm state for 10, 15, 20 years, depending on their genetic potential. But eventually what goes up must come down. And so think about how depleted someone has to be in that like high stress fight or flight state for so long. Oftentimes when we're in that low cortisol phase, that third phase of stress, we tend to be very depleted in a lot of nutrients. Our body doesn't have a lot of energy to expend on things. So it's very surprising that your estrogen and progesterone levels are optimal or okay. And I would guess, like, if it were me, I would assume that probably things aren't optimal until my adrenal hormones are optimized. Been eating fully nourished about 2 months after being pescatarian for a year. This month I felt emotional, frustrated, tired, and annoyed. But once my period started, I was like a new person. Could this be estrogen? Yeah, it often is estrogen. And that is the fun experience of estrogen. Thoughts on sprouts, broccoli, sunflower, microgreens, etc. More as a condiment on FN meals for vitamin and mineral content. Yeah, I think sprouts can be an amazing mineral source. Like all herbs and sprouts, like are pretty easy to digest, and if you do really well on them, they can be a great complement to meals. For sure. And I think a lot of people think I'm like anti-vegetable, but I don't. I'm not anti-vegetable. I think it's just very particular to the person. I think even sometimes like ferments can be a great source of nutrients as well. Just not overdoing it. Like a bite or two at a meal is plenty. Can you recommend any face oils that are PUFA free? What do you think about marula oil? I personally don't have any experience with marula oil. I know emu oil is pretty popular. It does have some PUFA, but it's mostly monounsaturated, I believe. And then squalene oil tends to be a favorite, which I really like. That's what I personally use. Jojoba is also helpful because it's more of like a wax. So I think it is saturated or not polyunsaturated. So those are kind of like the ones that I stick to. Does super high zinc on an HTMA always mean low zinc in the body? Copper levels were normal. Not always, but usually it means zinc is actively being lost. Sometimes it can mean like a high zinc like in the water or the shampoo or something like that. Like sometimes it could be like just high zinc on the hair, but a lot of times it does mean a loss, especially if copper is normal. Also considering like, has there been any like multivitamin usages or like zinc supplement usages, which could lead to like an overdoing it, which is a possibility as well. Sorry, I lost my place again, guys. You know I do this at least once, but this is the second time. Great. It's like I go to scroll down, and if I get too crazy, then it goes all the way to the bottom. All right. Wow, you guys have asked a lot of questions, which is awesome. Okay. Is staring at screens all day healthy, unhealthy, working from home? Yeah, of course. Coming from the person who's literally staring at a screen right now, I try to just practice balance as much as possible. So, going out into the sun, not like staring all day, looking away, doing some other things. But yeah, it can definitely be unhealthy just because it's a screen that has blue light, and it's also just like not social interaction. So it's not super great for the brain, but it's one of those things where, sometimes we can't do much about it. I'm carb sensitive. I'm keto temporarily. Until when should wait until I eat carbs again? How should I feel? A lot of people who have really poor gut bacteria or have been like low carb for a long time are very carb sensitive. And so they have to be implemented very slowly and are like easily digested. And sometimes that takes some experimentation to figure out what works best. But yeah, usually when people are carb sensitive, they're not carb sensitive. They're sensitive to what's going on in their gut. So there's gut bacteria or other like funguses involved. They are severely insulin resistant because of either PUFAs or magnesium deficiencies or other issues going on. So usually people aren't sensitive to carbs themselves. It's what's going on with the carbs. And if you don't deal with that issue, then it's just going to continue to feel like you're carb sensitive. Einkorn flour or sprouted whole wheat flour for sourdough, which is better? I think I would try both and figure out what works well. I would maybe buy a bag of one, use that up, and then buy a bag of the other and figure out what I like better. Vitalife Vitamin E make my girlfriend nauseous and feel sick. Is that the MCT or die-off detox? Some people, like a lot of people said that the new PUFA Protect is making them nauseous. I had that experience the first 2 days that I took it, which made me think that it was like a detox reaction. If it kept happening, I would be like, but I do think it could be a detox. I know a lot of people, they get kind of nauseous when they start doing vitamin E. What are your thoughts on natural mineral waters? I live in a spot where we have a bunch of natural springs. They taste horrible, but they're a good way to get the minerals I'm lacking. As long as there's not a lot of like non-organic calcium or non-organic iron in them, which a lot of times now, like unfortunately, none of our springs are natural anymore because of acid rain. So just being careful about what's in them if you know. Purely curiosity striking. Is progesterone dominance a thing? Can it be harmful like estrogen dominance? And is it equally important to detoxify progesterone at the end of the luteal phase? So it's really interesting that you asked that. I think it would be very difficult to achieve. I think there's a lot of people who have high progesterone that their body, and of course, like there's a lot of people in this conventional space that are, or not conventional space, but in this functional space that say like, oh, progesterone overload or excess can make you feel like sleepy and tired, and they'll like list a bunch of estrogen dominant symptoms. And I'm like, is it possible that we have a lot of estrogen or iron or copper stored in our tissues and our body's trying to actually protect us from the estrogen in the tissues? Because I've seen a lot of people who have a lot of estrogen dominant symptoms have very high, even like overly high progesterone. And it always makes me wonder if their body is doing like the best thing that could possibly happen, which is protecting the body from estrogen. But I think that progesterone doesn't stick around long enough and is used up so much just because we have such a stressful world that I don't think a progesterone dominance thing is a thing, because progesterone is supposed to be the dominant hormone of the luteal phase. That's the difference. Is estrogen is not supposed to be dominant ever, except for like there's like a specific moment in time right before ovulation that it is dominant. That's the only time estrogen should be dominant. Progesterone should be dominant the rest of the all of the luteal phase. And so that's really like the difference. Is progesterone is meant to be dominant, whereas estrogen is actually not meant to be dominant. So that's the way that I look at it. What gut issues are you currently trying to fix? I'm not really trying to fix anything. I guess I'm trying to like optimize gut health. I'm doing a lot of experimentation because I'm actually working on a gut program for you guys. So I'm doing a lot of like self-experimentation, looking at the different supplement combinations, kind of seeing how they affect my gut health and a few other people. So yeah, it's mostly experimentation. I'm always looking to like gain better carb tolerance, better insulin sensitivity, better nutrient absorption, overall just better metabolic health in general. Looking at like how my temps and pulses are reacting to certain things, stuff like that. But no, I'm actually working on a gut program for you guys, and that's there's nothing that I'm like specifically trying to fix. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Jeff. This is where I start to mumble. I feel like I've talked too much. Sorry, you guys. Hi, Jess. If starting to supplement with progesterone oil, when is a good day to start in your cycle? From day 7 to 21 or from day 14 to 21? I think it's just personal. Most of the time people choose to do day 14 to 21 to kind of mimic the natural production of progesterone. But I think, people have experimented with all types of things. What is the idea behind crushed eggshells? Eggshell calcium powder is a great replacement. It's one of the most bioavailable forms of calcium carbonate, from a natural source. Like, I don't know why someone would want to take a supplement made in a lab when they could make it from something that they are, they know exactly where it came from. So it's just pure calcium. That's all eggshells are. And it's a calcium supplement for people who maybe can't get calcium from other sources. Is there anywhere I can learn about temp and pulse and how to diagnose or work on myself if I don't get the money right now? Yeah. Sign up for my free Temps and Pulse freebie on my website. You can go to jessicaashwellness.com/metabolism, and I have a free Temps and Pulse training that helps you learn a little bit more about Temps and Pulse is. Trying raw goat's milk after colona because I developed some cysts on my chin and jawline with colona is a good sign that I have no digestive discomfort with goat's milk, but the acne I'm getting is milder. Yeah, it's probably a good sign. Listening to the body is the best way to go about it. So yeah, it's probably a great sign. Is there anything I can do with sore throats when regulating body temps? I've been slowly regulating body temps, but I get sore throats. On days my temps are low, I have no sore throat. Interesting. So remember, guys, when we raise our metabolism, sometimes like viruses and bacteria, they can't survive anymore. And so you're strengthening the host, you. And so sometimes that can result in like swollen lymph nodes and things like that. And that's actually the body taking control of these things, which is great. So is it swollen or sore lymph nodes or sore throat? Sometimes we just need to support our body with like sometimes raw honey can be helpful. I like to do like cloves. Some people do like star anise. I really like a tea called Throat Coat by Traditional Medicinals. It helps a lot for a sore throat for me. But yeah, anything like I do like warm lemon water, warm ginger tea, those types of things. Post-baby, my body seems to have overabundance of estrogen going on, and my doctor is wanting to regulate with birth control, but I'd rather try my best to do this naturally. What do you suggest? I highly recommend diving into my Instagram. I talk all about teaching women how to regulate their metabolism so that they can better detoxify hormones. Remember, oftentimes estrogen dominance is an estrogen elimination issue, how our body's breaking it down, and we need nutrients to do so. So I highly recommend diving into the information on my Instagram. I take magnesium citrate. Is that bad? So according to like Morley Robbins and some other people, it can actually down regulate our ability to use copper. So I'm not a big fan, and it kind of is like more of a laxative than anything else. I don't think it's a very highly absorbable form of magnesium. Would the CVS brand of milk and magnesia be good to make the magnesium bicarbonate? The only other ingredient is purified water, I believe. Awesome. That's so great to learn because Good Sense stopped making milk and magnesia. So it's been hard to find a brand that works well that doesn't have bleach in it. So yes, if you found a clean brand, yes, go for it. I'm struggling with body sweat. I've heard about a relationship with it and magnesium. Yeah, most minerals can help regulate like how the body loses hydration or fluids. And so yeah, magnesium, sodium, potassium can sometimes be very helpful. What vitamin E do you recommend again? I like PUFA Protect by MitoLife. I also like Unique E. I like Ultimate E by Thorne. There's a few different brands. I actually have a whole IG post dedicated, and I have all the brands I like in there. Sorry if this is TMI. Stools have increased from 1 time a day to 2 times daily on pro-metabolic diet. However, why is it that my first stools are easily passed and well-formed, but the second of the day is opposite and leaves me feeling unsatisfied? Well, I would question if 2 is better than 1. Maybe your body's like getting to the point where you're going to have 2 full bowel movements, but the second one is not quite there yet. Like, is that a possibility? I posted a question in FN this morning and learned that a few women are dealing with this common concern. When waking up in the morning, sometimes we feel dizzy, kind of like the morning hangover spin. It happens when we turn over or switch positions. I've noticed that both times it's happening, I've been very hungry in the morning. Could this be due to low blood sugar? Have you or anyone you've worked with experienced this? Do you have any suggestions on how to alleviate this? After a 3-month appointment with my hormone specialist, she suggested I started supplementing with 2,000 of IUs of vitamin D. I live in Alberta, Canada, so it's light at 8 a.m. and dark around 4 or 4:30. So I don't get a lot of sunlight, and our summers are very short. I know you don't advocate for vitamin D, so what do you suggest I do? I went through the lesson in FN. I've been doing red light therapy, but I can't do a lot of dairy yet. Would it be okay to supplement with vitamin D? Yeah, so a lot of times if you're feeling like low blood sugar symptoms and you're also feeling lightheaded, a lot of times it is blood sugar is not being regulated properly. So this is where we would ask ourselves, are we eating enough? Are we eating too many carbohydrates? Are we eating enough fat before bed? Fat slows digestion of sugar. And so some people need to do a lot more fat to keep things balanced for a long period of time. So yes, I would experiment with a bedtime snack and figure out what needs to be eaten before bed to help keep blood sugar balanced throughout the evening and into the morning. That does sound like low blood sugar. And it's very common. Some people will wake up with a racing heart. Some people will wake up and not be able to go back to sleep. Some people will wake up and be very, very hot, like with night sweats. Some people will wake up dizzy. Yes, there are a lot of different symptoms that come with that. And then I think like with anything, with the vitamin D thing, I think it's just contextual and how you feel as a person. I don't think there's anything right or wrong about it. So I think it's just sometimes experimenting. But I don't think a small amount is a bad idea. I'm neutral on the subject. I don't necessarily think people like I don't encourage people to do it, but I don't necessarily encourage people against it, especially if it's a kind of a more conservative amount, especially if you're not getting a lot of vitamin D. What is your favorite brand of salt? I use Malden's like flake sea salt, but I also like kosher salt, like kosher canning salt, or just like regular like Celtic sea salts are okay as well. I try to stick to white sea salts if I can, because anytime they're a different color, they're a little bit more contaminated with metals, but I don't stress about it that much. I've been doing FN for about 3 weeks and my temperatures are decent, but I haven't seen any weight gain. Could this be normal too? Oh yeah, you don't have to gain weight. Some people just do, and I like to bring that awareness because I think there are a lot of women struggling with the weight gain. And I just want them to understand why, but you don't have to gain weight. Can you convince me to stop vaping nicotine? I have ADHD and it helps me to focus. Should I just try nicotine pills patch? Can I convince you? I can't convince you. I think it's important. Like, I don't actually think that nicotine is bad. I think that a lot of times how it's delivered is bad. So like tobacco or, so what's in that vape? It's not just about the nicotine. What other chemicals are in there? That's what I would be more focused on. But no, I can't convince you or not convince you. But that would be my what I would be thinking through. What are your thoughts on plantains as a pro-metabolic food? Any pros or cons to them? I think they're delicious, but don't feel like I hear them mentioned much as a pro-metabolic carb source. Yeah, they're great. I include them in the Fully Nourished cookbook. I love plantains. They're so good. Have you seen cases where hair doesn't grow back? I'm hoping mine will. I think it just depends on the person, like what's causing it. Yeah, I mean, I guess like seen cases, not seen cases. Yeah, I've definitely seen people that it's a struggle to get their hair to stop falling out, and like it takes a long time for them to see regrowth. Yeah, of course I've seen those cases, but that's not like a super big complaint that I hear all the time. Like at least people are telling me pretty regularly that their hair has stopped falling out. When on antibiotics for UTI, is it okay to take D-mannose as well? I'm not sure. I think I can't see why that would be a problem. But again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a pharmacist. So that would be something to ask your pharmacist about. What glycine do you take and add to your ice cream? I just take bulk supplements. Is it safe to take bovine collagen peptides? Any brand you recommend? I use Great Lakes brand. Can you explain the possible reasons how a very slender person with a fairly good diet, generally low in PUFAs and junk food, can be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes? Do they have iron overload? And were they bottle fed? Because remember that formula is full of PUFAs as well as iron. So that's something I always question. And then how's their stress levels? I mean, that as well. Magnesium deficiency, is that a possibility? How's their gut? There's a lot of connection between gut health and our ability to respond to insulin properly. So there are a lot of other factors besides PUFAs. What brand of glycine do you recommend? Oh, I use bulk supplements, but it's not like the one that I recommend. That's the one I've been using. I've been reading some articles from Weston A. Price Foundation. They seem pretty big on homeopathy. What are your thoughts on this approach to health-related issues? I think it works pretty well. I've heard so many different people tell me like amazing stories. Even like one girl used homeopathy to be able to tolerate dairy again. I think she said she used like Calc. I actually just ordered a ton of books on homeopathy to do a lot more research, because it's not something that I'm very knowledgeable about, but I've been wanting to really dive into it. And so I'm in a place right now where I'm taking a little bit of a step back, like a research break, a hiatus. And it's one thing that I'm going to dive into. And just wanted to confirm, is a detox lemonade and adrenal cocktail okay every single day, or better at certain parts in our cycle? Yeah, they're good every day. I mean, if you wanted to just do them at certain parts, that's always okay. Like sometimes people will choose to use them strategically over time, but they're pretty safe. Have you heard of leafy tincture? It's turmeric, ginger, and pepper, I believe. I've used it during pregnancy for headaches. Oh, interesting. I also have been getting headaches almost every night, 6 months pregnant, and eating every few hours. Yeah, some people get headaches from low blood sugar, especially when it's in the evening. Um, so sometimes it's just a need for a little bit more calories overall, protein, and then evaluating carbohydrate. And then is it also estrogen? I mean, estrogen can be involved in headaches. Metabolic markers were improving a lot. Digestion, temps, energy. After about 4 months of implementing pro-metabolic changes, all of a sudden this past week, things took a hit. Bloating, constipation, low temps, weight jumped up. So discouraged and confused. Is there anything you'd recommend adjusting when something like this happens? I think it's just evaluating. So like saying, have I been stressed? Did I miss an ovulation? Where am I in my cycle? Some people start to hit this like estrogen detox point where they were feeling really good and then their body started to actually, their body finally has the energy to mobilize what it's been holding on to for so long, which has been kind of holding them back. And so they start to move it and they're feeling crappy and they're like, oh, I feel horrible. Like I've taken 5 steps backwards. And it's like, well, now your body's removing that junk. And so sometimes that's the case, especially if it's happening during like the luteal phase or towards the period. But when stuff like that happens, I just reevaluate. I also, like I tell you guys all the time, activated charcoal, like do not underestimate the power of activated charcoal. Like seriously, do not. And then also like evaluate your consistency. Like, did you kind of get relaxed on the raw carrot salad? Did you get relaxed on some things? Because I feel like sometimes when people are feeling better and they've been consistent for a long time, they start to get kind of relaxed on some things. And that's when they start to feel a little worse. If I am doing fully nourished and detoxing estrogen for sure, is my newly emerging body acne due to that? And why is my face not breaking out as well? Some people, it's interesting. Some people break out on their back, some people break out on their arms, their chest, and some people break out on their face. It can be due to estrogen. Sometimes it can be due to gut disruption, but oftentimes, when you think of the skin as a detox organ and the body's going to mobilize things through the skin, if it can't mobilize it out of the gut and the liver, that's kind of where we lie. So we want to make sure we're really focusing in on the liver and the gut. And if that's not helping, then at that point we want to reevaluate. But people get breakouts in different areas. If someone has a lot of weight to lose, like 80 pounds, and fat can store estrogen, does that mean that we will have estrogen detox symptoms until they have lost it all? Sometimes it just takes time. So for some people, yes, it's just being aware that fat cells do store estrogen. Not all fat cells do, not all people do, but it's just something to be aware of. And that's why I always say, like, we want to lose fat the right way. If we are supporting estrogen detoxification and our body, we're losing weight the right way, we're losing fat steadily over time, that is usually our body can handle that estrogen, right? Our liver's breaking it down, our gallbladder's spurting it out, and then it's being eliminated through our bowel movements. But if we're trying to force our body to lose weight, for example, intermittent fasting or keto, we are mobilizing sometimes those free fatty acids and toxins faster than our body can handle. And this can be a big problem. But our body can take care of stuff. We don't need to stress about it as long as we're supporting the body with what it needs. Thoughts on applying Differin to the skin, which is a retinoid, so I guess high in vitamin A. It's helped my skin a lot, but worried about internally messing up my minerals and vitamins. I don't really stress about stuff like that. I mean, if you're finding that you're not reacting to it well, then like I'd reevaluate. But I don't know enough. Like I just don't stress about. Oh, not sure if it's worth stressing over. Yeah, I don't stress about stuff like that. How many milligrams of magnesium bicarbonate do you take a day, or how many ounces of mitigate stress? Usually like 2 to 4 ounces. I don't even measure it. I just do it by splashes. So I'm not sure how many milligrams that is. Can a pregnant woman supplement vitamin E, and what is a safe dose? Thank you. Not something you kind of have to do your own research on. A lot of people say yes, and then some people say no. So you kind of have to like do your own research and figure that out for yourself. I personally will be supplementing it during pregnancy, just with what I know. But again, it's like whatever you're comfortable with and based on what you feel is right for your body. I was doing good with diet and eating regularly, but the thought of eggs make me nauseous, and now I feel nauseous all the time. Trying to still eat, but toast, rice, cheese, and milk is all that sounds good. Sometimes it just we need to support our gallbladder and our liver. Sometimes our gut is a little bit messed up. Sometimes we just need to listen to our bodies. So it just, I'm not really sure what the question is. Sometimes we just have to wait it out a little bit. Where do you get your olives? What are your favorite kinds? I I get all types of olives. I usually try to buy organic when I can, or at least like just, making sure I'm aware of ingredients. I usually get them at like my health food store. I can't remember the types. Like I get all different types. I usually like green olives. What is your opinion on chemical peels for deep acne scars? I highly recommend checking out Sarah at Healthy Skin Glows. She's an expert regarding like the skin barrier and just trying to restore the skin barrier. So she probably has a lot more helpful information than I do. Hi, Jess. I'm currently experiencing the first spotting in over a year. Yay! I've been trying to track any sign of ovulation in the past 2 weeks, but so far no luck. How can I know if this is a real period? I guess I'll have to keep tracking every day until I eventually have a positive ovulation. Yeah, so sometimes we have spotting and we just need to keep paying attention. And then sometimes a real period comes 2 weeks later. Sometimes we bleed a little bit more 28 days later. So it just kind of depends. I think like just paying attention, keeping track of it, and continuing on is the best way to go. And we'll know if it becomes a pattern when it does become a pattern. But sometimes like if it's just one-time event, it's hard to know what it is until you have another event and you can start noticing patterns. Do you know any way to regulate Raynaud's? There's a lot of people that say, like in my research, I've come across like autoimmunity being connected to estrogen a lot and also gut symptoms. And then being aware with Raynaud's, like how is your circulation overall? Like how are your temperatures, your pulses? Those are things that I would be interested in looking into. I've heard you mention people with low thyroid can have issues digesting foods high in beta carotene. Is it true that eating a lot of foods high in beta carotene can also be harmful to your thyroid? That's possible. That's why like rinsing your raw carrot salad or just being aware of like if your hands are turning orange is a good idea. But yeah, I mean, it's possible. I think it's different for everybody. But if, for example, if I felt like my temps and pulses were going way down every time I ate a sweet potato, I'd be kind of like conscious of it. I wouldn't know if it's the beta carotene, the sweet potato, like there's a lot of factors there. So I wouldn't immediately be like, oh my gosh, the beta carotene is hurting my thyroid. But I would be aware of it. Is glycerin okay in my chlorophyll? I'm honestly, like I try to stay away from glycerin, but I honestly can't remember why. Sometimes I have like a photographic memory. And so when I see something, I don't remember where it's from. I just remember like a phrase. And so like sometimes I have weird stuff in my brain where I don't remember like the context. I just remember a phrase and I do things sometimes weirdly and I don't know why I'm doing them. So that's one thing that, I don't know why I avoid it. I honestly don't know the reason, but I don't, if it's not a problem for you, I don't see why it would be a problem. Haha, you referring to my old metabolism as the trash metabolism? Yes. Yeah, it's like, I just know how to put things so eloquently, don't I? Vegan, CrossFitter, fasting, anti-sugar. Yeah, I mean, I guess we can classify it as like trash metabolism. Is it fine to eat the skin on carrots? Some people say they bother them. Any type of root vegetables have something called saponins in the skin, so it protects them from bugs. This is why I don't personally eat the skin of like potatoes or carrots or anything like that. Is it wrong to eat the skin of carrots? I don't think so. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Do you know anything about using progesterone throughout the cycle to suppress ovulation, aka as a contraceptive? I don't know much about it, but if you've ever read Ray Peat's book From PMS to Menopause, he talks a bit about it, and he says that using it intravaginally can actually be an effective contraceptive. I don't know if anyone wants to experiment and tell me how that goes for them, but because his thing is kind of like tricking the body. If there's already progesterone present, then the body thinks it's pregnant. So I have heard of that. And there's a lot of people that have talked about it. I just, I haven't heard someone definitively say like, yes, it works, or no, it doesn't work. But yeah, I mean, in theory, like thinking about it, I think it could possibly suppress ovulation. Do you and your boyfriend eat the same? No way. He eats that way when I'm with him, but no. When I cook for him or provide him meals, like I'm thinking about what he likes, but also in the context of pro-metabolic eating, it's helpful because he likes healthy things like proteins and rice and eggs and steak and stuff like that. So it's fairly easy to cook him pro-metabolically. I don't think he like thinks of it that way. But yes, I think he doesn't eat like that all the time. Absolutely not. To my great despair. But we also don't live together, so that, you know, when we're together, he's eating pro-metabolically. But when we're not, like I can't control how he eats. But once we do live together and get married and that kind of thing, like I will, whenever I cook, it's going to be pro-metabolic. Any tips for pregnancy constipation? Sometimes stewed prunes can be very helpful. So some of my clients, you know, have pregnancy constipation. It's just kind of figuring it out. But stewed prunes, like drinking the juice of the prune and then eating the stewed prune, can be very a pretty helpful way to get it going. Can you explain more about why some people might feel more inflamed after starting to eat pro-metabolically? Yeah, so when cortisol is high or adrenaline is high, remember that those are naturally anti-inflammatory, not in a good way. So this is where when people say something's anti-inflammatory, it's, you always should ask, like, how is it lowering inflammation? Because that doesn't necessarily always mean it's good. Inflammation is the body's response to an injury, right? So when the body's chronically inflamed, oftentimes the body will respond with cortisol to lower that inflammation. Now, that was the body's response to an injury. And we don't want to necessarily always suppress inflammation in the wrong way. We want to actually stop the root of inflammation. And so cortisol is anti-inflammatory because think of it as your fight or flight hormone. Let's say you're running from an angry bear, you step on a rock and you break your foot. You have to keep going. You've got to keep running or you're going to die. And so that's where adrenaline and cortisol come in. Adrenaline is going to keep you going, and cortisol is going to kind of be that like anti-inflammatory painkiller. But what goes up must come down, and that pain will come back later. Like you're going to feel that your foot broke sometime or another. It's just going to take a little bit of time for those stress hormones to go down. And so that's what's happening is as you start to eat pro-metabolically, you're actually lowering your stress hormones. You're actively working to lower stress hormones so your metabolism can start working well again. And that's what you're feeling is you're in that temporary space between where stress hormones are now lower and your metabolism is still trashed. And that's kind of like where it can really feel kind of crappy to be in that place. But it's a physiological response because you're no longer running on stress hormones, which is actually good, but it cannot feel so good. How to get rid of gut issues like IBS or SIBO. It can sometimes take like some layers, but first and foremost, we got to stop eating all that irritating food. So nix the nuts and seeds, eat the poorly prepared nix the poorly prepared grains, the poorly prepared beans, tons of raw vegetables, tons of cruciferous vegetables, all that kind of stuff is usually like contributing to issues. And then figure out what your gut needs. Do you need to restructure? Do you need to kill some bacteria? Do you need to, soothe the intestinal lining? There's a lot of factors to gut health. Do you need to boost stomach acid? Do you need to support digestive enzymes? So, there are a lot of layers to gut health, and it's kind of important to figure out. But first, we got to remove what's irritating us. Can beef liver deplete zinc? Someone in the FN community has said she was told this by her doctor. I'm not sure. To my understanding, liver has a good amount of zinc, but that's why I also do recommend oysters, which have zinc in them as well. But yeah, I've never heard that before. Could I eventually stop taking thyroid medication with your tips? But I'm going to rewind to that question. This is why you don't want to overdo liver. Like the equivalent of about 4 ounces a week is plenty. Because, yeah, of course, anything mineral rich can displace other minerals. Could I eventually stop taking thyroid medication with your tips? I can't tell you yes or no. Some people do just find that they no longer need thyroid meds, but that's something you have to work out with your doctor. And I wouldn't focus on like getting off of thyroid meds. I would focus on supporting the body as a whole. And then, if you're starting to feel like you need to reassess where your thyroid levels are at, like do that with your doctor. Would you be able to save the dairy stories you uploaded yesterday or the day before as a story highlight? If you haven't already, I'd like to send them to my friends to educate them. Yeah, of course. I'll add them to the dairy 2 highlight if there's room. And if not, I'll make a new dairy highlight. For breakfast, is it okay to add the collagen, milk, and honey macros as part of your breakfast macros, or should it be breakfast separate from coffee drink, if that makes sense? Yeah, I always do that. Like, it's very difficult for me to get enough protein in the morning if I don't count the collagen in my coffee as protein part of breakfast, if that makes sense. Since eating metabolically about 3 months, I've had some serious armpit stank. I know it's part of the detox process, so I've actually stopped wearing deodorant. Yeah, it can be really rough when you start to move iron. Iron tends to be the BO inducer. But I like to use like the bentonite clay armpit masks, or just like get a good sweat in like with a detox bath. But yeah, it can be a serious stink. But yeah, the bentonite clay masks tend to help quickly. And I like to mix bentonite clay with apple cider vinegar, which tends to help a little bit more. How to get vitamin D in the winter. Usually we store enough vitamin D in the summer if we have good magnesium levels and good potassium levels and just good mineral levels in general, like copper and B vitamins. But if we don't have those, we tend to not make enough, and so we don't store enough. And so it can be difficult to get vitamin D in the winter, especially if we don't have sun. So sometimes either using like a vitamin D lamp, red lamp, which doesn't always give you vitamin D, but it gives you other benefits. Or sometimes people just opt to do a vitamin D supplement. Former vegan, raising iron levels was all the rage. What is a good source to read why iron is actually not desirable? Yeah, look into Morley Robbins' work. He's kind of like the guy, the magnesium advocacy group guy. And he talks about, you can look, he has like 80 articles on iron. They're really like nice short reads, very easy to understand. He breaks this stuff down into a very easy to understand way. So yeah, look up his like iron posts, and they're numbers. So you can say like, you could type in Morley Robbins iron post number 1 and it will come up. And then you can do like Morley Robbins iron post number 2 and will come up. But yeah, so like once you dive into that, I always say like once you go there, you can never come back. What would you recommend apart from eating pro-metabolic for a pregnant woman with high levels of prolactin? Thank you. Just lowering stress in general. So what could be possible stressors during pregnancy? A lot of people are needing higher amounts of minerals, and then like, you know, being just aware of sleep, just environment as a whole, like how are your stress levels doing? But yeah, I mean, mostly it's just about getting enough nutrients. I know you guys know I was going to say that, but a lot of times like pregnant women are just needing a little bit higher calorie needs. How do you know if benign fibroids of the eyelid are estrogen iron related? I've had 3 removed last year and they told me they could grow back. Next week, I'm scheduled to have them removed again. That's really interesting. I don't know. Sometimes I just don't know, but that would be interesting if you do end up finding out that that's a factor. I remember you said something about diaper rashes with babies. That was not normal, even though it's common. I was curious as to what could cause them. My baby gets rashes often, and I feel so bad. I think there are different things. Like sometimes their gut health just needs some work. Sometimes it's like what we're using on them, like possibly like toxic lotions or what's on the wipes. So there are factors, but a lot of times it's just what they're eating is bothering them. If I have iron overload, will it show up on an HTMA test? Usually no. You have to look at iron in the blood. Specifically, which of Ona's progesterone cream do you buy? And would it be best to just use during the luteal phase? I don't buy her cream. I buy her vitamin E oil. So the progesterone oil and vitamin E. I don't know the correct terminology, but fibroids on the skin are the same as wart skin tags. So isn't PCOS blood sugar related? Yeah, so yeah, like skin tags are usually tied to estrogen and also blood sugar or insulin resistance. So that, you know, I mean, some people get them on their armpits, some people get them on their sides, like everyone gets them in a different area, but that would be interesting. I've never heard of them on the eyelids, but I don't see why that's not possible. I have MTHFR. What does this actually mean, and what should I look out for due to support? There's a lot of people that I think overblow this issue. I think it has a lot to do with copper deficiency. I know that Matt Blackburn has a really good post on MTHFR and copper. I can't remember exactly. All right, my computer's about to die, guys. So if I'm like, bye, really quickly, it's because my computer is about to die. So I'm watching my percentage. Some days when I walk, I get some pain on my right side at an even height with my belly button. Do you have any ideas what it could be? Nothing shows on ultrasound. Do you like have muscular imbalances? Are you familiar with like trigger pointing and fascia release, like myofascial release? Sometimes it's just structural issues. When reintroducing dairy, would you wait until a certain day of your period? Like maybe start it once the bleeding stops to have the least impact on period pain? I would just do whatever you feel. So whatever, like knowing your history and like what goes on with your health, like I would do what you feel is right and what makes this, what makes the most sense. Went off dairy because my 5-month-old was miserable, but reintroducing back raw dairy seems better, but not perfect. Should I ease into it? Yeah, sometimes it can take some time. Sometimes raw dairy doesn't make the difference. It's like the type of dairy. So A2 is better than A1 for some people. So like focusing on goats and sheep's milk can sometimes be better. But sometimes kids are very sensitive to dairy because of the V word, which you guys know I'm not going to say it. Would it be a bad idea to get mom to try progesterone cream if she's going through menopause, but I have a feeling she could be relatively hypothyroid mineral deficient? Thoughts? I've heard of a lot of women who go through menopause, don't know anything about anything, and use progesterone cream and see a lot of benefits. So, I think like, yeah, in a perfect world, they're going to focus on all the most important things. But in an imperfect world, like, is getting some progesterone better than not at all? Probably. Would you recommend doing more soothing techniques such as gelatin for the digestive tract before introducing things like oregano? I think it just depends, but no, I don't think so. But yeah, I think gelatin is a fundamental part of like supporting the gut. What is the relationship between aspirin and blood thinning? Should one be concerned about using it if they experience blood clots during their period? I would think aspirin would help with this, or no. Yeah, blood clots are usually just like you're bleeding faster than your body can keep up with the anti-clotting. That usually is not, aspirin's going to thin the blood, but I don't see, it might, I guess I could see how it might cause more clots. So I would pay attention to it for sure. And if I was a heavy bleeder, I would just be careful with aspirin and just keep an eye on it. TMI, but my vagina starts itching 3 to 4 days before my period starts. Wondering why this is. I think it has a lot to do with progesterone deficiency. I've had quite a few clients that tell me that when they're progesterone deficient. Can you please explain how aspirin and other painkillers such as Advil are different from each other? I don't think of aspirin as a daily supplement, only one to combat acute pain. Yeah, aspirin is acetylsalicylic acid, which is derived from salicylic acid containing plants like white willow bark, for example. Whereas Advil, Aleve, those types of things are COX inhibitors. They're second generation painkillers. So they're completely different. But yeah, if you want to do more research on aspirin, I highly recommend reading like Ray Peat's articles or looking on functional performance systems. If the chlorophyll concentrate I mentioned earlier doesn't work out, what type should I be on the lookout for? Not sure what classifies as ideal type or what it should be sourced from. Yeah, I personally like to use the brand World Organic. It's the only brand that I use because it's just pure chlorophyll. Please remind me of what to look for in a good red light. Like 660 nanometers or above, or like an incandescent light, incandescent red light. I just recently started following you. I'm coming from a vegan diet. I have horrible migraines, periods, and fungus issues. My hands and feet are always cold. What kind of diet would you recommend? I highly recommend diving into my IG a little bit, my Instagram page, reading through that, and just kind of starting to digest the information slowly and implement things as you feel comfortable. Every time I take oregano oil pills for bacterial overgrowth, I get menstrual cramps, sometimes my period earlier. I read it can affect hormones and increase blood flow, hence the cramps. What to do? That's why I only use wild oregano. I don't like most oreganos. What do you recommend for parasites, and do they affect histamine issues? Sometimes the body just takes care of parasites on its own. But I like to use maybe a wormwood or cloves, things like that tend to be pretty good. To test progesterone level, what day in the cycle is best? Do you recommend blood tests or Dutch tests? I think both can be fine, and it's usually 5 to 7 days after you ovulate. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me for the Q&A. We've gone way over 2 hours, and because my computer's about to die, I'm so sorry, but I have to end it. I appreciate your guys' engagement and just your guys' time, and all your questions are always amazing. So I hope you learned a little bit, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday.